Salutations, Legion of Doom. Welcome to Podcast The Storm, where socially awkward outcasts, crazy weirdos, and all around nerds convene to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the nerdy occultist, aka the Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Hello, everyone. It's a pretty full week this week, actually.
Mm,
I guess this week marks the resuming of your regularly scheduled programming with Podcast of the Storm. We're all caught up and we're back to mostly current events now.
And I'm your host, last time I want to be the brains for pop culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
I am doing well, ish, though I haven't eaten yet today. I mean, I actually no, I had a bag of chips earlier, so wrong.
Well, Giant Turtle says hello. Hello, Giant Turtle. Good to see you. Yeah, as Don said, we have a pretty full plate this week, so I don't think we should dilly-dally.
No. No dilly dallying, especially because we don't know if and when Corrupt will pop in.
Right. Now, this is from the
I
escapistmagazine.com.
think I think we should do the longer article first. The sensitivity readers one.
God damn it. Oh, okay, thanks for running it. All right, well, let me get that set up.
Because the escapist article was kind of a commentary on the issue raised in the sensitivity readers article.
Well, it's loading. I should have told that before I did that. All right. Okay. It's from salon.com. I have no particular power. Don't blame sensitivity readers for the latest censored books. From Roald Dahl to Ian Fleming, books are being changed, but the ones being blamed for it have the least power. It's written by Alison Stein, published March 12th, 2022. 2023. Sorry.
I I decline your supposition. You do have power. You are the moral arbiters of modern day society, and just like the moral arbiters of old, my stance has not changed. Just because it's social justice now and not family values traditionalism. The correct answer is, was, and always has been. Your morality has no place in the public sphere. Morality should be a private matter. Get fucked. Especially with regards to the arts.
All right. Gentle, I've heard of that article, though they are too late. Censorship is good, and people want it already came out.
Huh?
Gentle, I've heard of that article, though they are too late. Censorship is good, and people want it already came out.
Oh wow. This one basically covers the issue in long form with the and this is also a actual sensitivity reader that wrote this article. So this is this is getting it from the horse's mouth essentially. This is a sensitivity reader, or let's not beat around the bush, a moralistic censor trying to defend their censorship in their own words. So I figured that between it being more long form and it being from the horse's mouth, it would be worth covering. In any case, moving forward.
Mm. Words have been altered in multiple books by children's author Roald Dahl seemingly randomly at times and with little to no context, a move the publisher soon regretted and took back. In upcoming new editions of Ian Fleming's James Bond's novels, eth- eth- ethnicities have been removed, Variety reports, along with prerogative terms and descriptions.
So let's be real here. You're altering the text for nothing but arbitrarily moralistic reasons. No amount of pseudo intellectual dancing around is going to make this okay. And no, I don't mean because the author. No, the author's authority has nothing to do with this. The issue I have is altering the nature of the actual text, i.e., the thing in itself. I don't give a fuck about the author's opinion. I don't give a fuck about the publisher's opinion. I care about the text and its original form being maintained as much as possible. Now, granted, there's some gray area here for me, metaphysically speaking, or epistemologically speaking, because I do believe that authors do have a tendency to corrupt the ideas they channel more than they should. So you could, I suppose, make the argument of some kind of editorializing is okay on the grounds that it fixes the author's own personal biases, but that's not what you're doing. Again, you're not doing this in the name of the art. You're not trying to improve the art or make it qualitatively better in any way. You're doing it for moralistic reasons. And morality has no place in art, frankly. Unless you're explicitly doing a literal, like, after school special style moral propaganda piece. And even then, I would argue that the second you're doing those, you're creating something of non value, i.e., those kind of stories don't have much purpose and everyone loathes them. That's why the cliche of the very special episode or the show that has like the moral at the end is something that everyone grows up rolling their eyes at, and for very good reason. Anyway, moving forward.
Okay. What's going on with books? That is, what else is going on with books? Librarians, including elementary school librarians, are under fire and being persecuted. Lawmakers are targeting dozens upon dozens of books for removal after Governor Ron DeSantis, Republican Florida, uh, championed a bill requiring approval of all books in classrooms. Some, though certainly not all, of these targeted books mention race, sexuality, gender, even the Holocaust, with many authors writing personal stories from their own experiences. Okay,
Yeah, and I don't care. Like no, seriously. And let me give context to that because I realize that's going to get taken out of context to all kinds of hell. My point is that you're trying to bring up this in basically what amounts to whataboutism, i.e., you can't say our sensitivity reading is bad because this guy over here is doing something that we arbitrarily decide is worse than that. But you fail to keep in mind the fact that I can loathe both of you, i.e., I don't think either of these two sets of people are okay. I don't believe in censorship, like especially on moral grounds. Like, I don't believe in censorship no matter which side of the political compass is doing it. So I don't need to let you off the hook because Ron DeSantis is over there doing stupid things. I have enough loathing in my cold black heart to loathe both of you, frankly. Because what I loathe isn't even a partisan issue. What I loathe is moralistic authoritarianism. Period. If the thing you're doing is founded in moralistic authoritarianism, the answer is no and fuck off. And that answer will be no and fuck off, no matter which side of which political aisle you happen to be on. There's plenty of room in my life to hate both of you. And no amount of, well, we should get away with this because the other side is doing it too, nah, is an excuse. All that amounts to is you both should not get the fuck off, in my opinion. Like, rather than, well, everyone does it, so that means it's okay. My approach is, if everyone is doing it, then everyone needs to shut the fuck up and fuck off. Frankly,
Yeah.
it's not in any way justifiable. Period.
Eventually I'll ask why add the moralistic part, non-moralistic authoritarianism. Doesn't sound that fun either.
I mean, sure, but what I object to specifically is, frankly, 90. I rarely, if ever, see a kind of moralism or a kind of authoritarianism that isn't founded in moralism. And frankly, at the very least, the authoritarians who don't claim to be moral have some leeway with me, because as long as they know what they're doing is wrong, they're likely to at least have some self-awareness. But the authoritarians who think they're doing it for the greater good are infinitely more dangerous, because they're not manipulative opportunists who just want power. They actually believe what they're doing is morally righteous. And that makes them incredibly difficult to deal with, because someone who oppresses you just because they want to oppress you is capricious and childish, but they're not as dangerous as the people who will oppress you for your own good, for the greater good, and because they know what's better for you than you do. That's why authoritarianism with the moralistic element is worse for me. Like, I fear I fear authoritarians who don't try to be moralistic way less than I fear authoritarians who do try to be moralistic. And either way, most often people who justify authoritarianism justify it on moral ground because they think they're in the right for doing it.
Anyway, Mila.
Mm-hmm.
Around the same time, publishers have been changing a bunch of words in already published books, and some see this as either an attempt at wokeness or possibly attempting to cut off a future attack from lawmakers. But are publishers changing the right things? Who's behind all these edits? One thing is certain, it's not the fault of sensitivity readers, though they've been targeted too.
Piss off.
I mean, I
You,
don't really think we need sensitivity readers.
yeah, you're framing this in an inherently illogical way. You're assuming that they need to be changed, period. And unless you're talking about literal editing, as in editing for, grammar and quality and context, the answer is no. Like, you shouldn't be changing books, period. And quite frankly, again, this is why I made the point about piss off with your authorial intent as well, because there have been some authors who recently have decided that they are going to edit their own work and thereby ruin their own work because they're not the same people as they were when they wrote the damn things. Cough, cough, Neil Gaiman in particular. So yeah, I don't think the author has the authority to change what they write either. In my worldview, in my epistemology, an author's job is to serve the art they make, not the other way around. And quite frankly, when authors get egotistical about their art rather than trying to be humble and objective about their art is the exact moment when they cease to be good authors. Almost invariably. Again, citing the example of Neil Gaiman. Every change he has made to the Sandman since the original run from 89 to 94 has slowly but surely ruined bits and pieces of something that I hold in as high an esteem as I can hold anything that is ostensibly fictional. Anyway, moving on.
Varieties report about Fleming mentioned sensitivity readers are away. Rights holders in Fleming Publications Ltd. commissioned a review by sensitivity readers. That's a group that gets the blame in the second paragraph of one of the Guardian stories about the edits made to Bell's writing too. Puffin has hired sensitivity readers to rewrite chunks of the author's text, the Guardian reports, resulting in extensive changes across Dahl's work.
Yeah, and again, the answer is no. The answer is piss off. The answer is you do not get to do this. And if Roald Dahl was alive, not even he would get to do this. In a world where Dalton had the Infinity Gauntlet, not even authors would get the chance to change their stories in that way. They can write sequels where they amend things. They can they can they can create supplementary material where they retcon stuff, but they should not be able to just arbitrarily decide to unwrite things they have written. Like in writing, as in any kind of expression, the correct answer is usually more expression, not less expression. I.e., rather than changing things that have already been written, write supplementary material or sequels or things that give more context. The answer to bad writing is more writing, not moralistic censorship. Just like the answer to bad speech is more speech, or particularly argumentation, contrary and contraventory speech. Moving on. Um, I don't agree. I don't agree. The 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 only thing we can judge is whether or not the expression is good, i.e., we can judge whether the thing being expressed is worth expressing. We can judge whether um we wish to consume the thing being expressed. We can judge whether we agree with the thing being expressed, and we can certainly argue with the thing being expressed. But I don't think there's such a thing as too much expression or something being too expressed.
I'm back.
The most you could say is disproportional expression, but even that is arbitrary to the point of meaninglessness in most cases. And I would still lean more into the answer to bad expression is more expression, not less.
Sorry, I had to grab dinner.
Yeah.
Moving on, or
Yeah.
okay. Varieties report about Fleming mentioned sensitivity readers writing. Rights holders in. Did I read that? Yeah, I did. My bad.
I think you might have, yeah.
Okay. Sensitivity reader data. But why are sensitivity readers, and what are sensitivity readers, and do they really have this much power? And then
Yes, you're essentially the moral censors of the modern age, and you can piss off.
Okay.
Moving on.
Well, there's a tweet here. Granted, it's from 2019, so I don't know how credible it really is. But from someone named, well, I'm not going to say that. If you want, white people, don't complain about sensitivity readers, please. Thank you. What is a sensitivity reader? It's a reader with knowledge of a particular culture that your writing touches upon. I almost added in which you are not a part of, but that's not always true.
Um, there's a giant ass glaring hypocrisy here, um, or rather a thing that, or rather a lack of foresight here, my dear, and that's that people of those cultures disagree with you, and they don't like the sensitivity readers either. Don't play this "I speak on the behalf of all the dispossessed people" card, because frankly, all you're doing is claiming that your opinion of what those people should think or what those people do think is more important than all the people who disagree with you. Because I can guarantee you that I can almost guarantee with a reasonable degree of certainty that your answer to my objection here, the objection of there are people of these various identities that disagree with you and find sensitivity readers counterproductive or immoral, um, would be something to the effect of those people don't count because they have internalized self-hatred or some shit. Which is basically just a childishly pseudo-intellectual way of going, either you agree with my supposition of how you think or you hate yourself. It's literally a way of going, your opinion doesn't matter because your brain is broken and you have Stockholm syndrome. Which ultimately amounts to my attempt to speak on the behalf of X, Y, or Z demographic is more legitimate than the opinions of some of the people within that demographic because I arbitrarily decided that my supposition is correct and their supposition is wrong, even if I am outside of their position and they are inside it,
Yeah.
which is just bullshit.
Okay. Adventure asked a very interesting question. Uh, Although this would be a sidebar, so keep that in mind. Is there a job that is the non-woke version of sensitivity readers, like just cultural consultants to tell you all about the cultural culture and help you implement things into your stuff? It's not a true POC fallacy.
Yeah.
Let me.
There are people who literally and these people have existed for a long time. There are people whose job it is to basically be the writing equivalent of an expert witness. Like there are expert consultants in shows, in movies, in books, and so on. I mean, hell, with regards to the sort of occult sphere, I've been the sort of expert witness for a lot of people when they were writing various magical and fantasy based stories.
Hello.
Yeah, present company very much included. Um,
Thank you.
so yeah, it is a thing, and there's also this thing where authors can research shit for themselves some of the fucking time, which is a skill I think modern day authors are lacking. In that, and I can say that with a certain degree of certainty because they don't know how to understand people who think differently from them. And if they had basic research skills, it would be very easy to obtain that information.
Hmm. Let me know.
Well, it's not even a no true Scotsman fallacy because the no true Scotsman fallacy doesn't necessarily imply some kind of moral judgment. It's literally you don't have the rights to your own brain because I have arbitrarily decided that your brain is broken. It's worse than a no true Scotsman. It's every Scotsman who disagrees with me um, is immoral and invalid. It's not just they are not a real Scotsman. It's they are a blight on the very notion of Scotland. Anyway, moving on.
Sorry, I was chilling.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, moving on. Sensitivity readers are early readers, often writers themselves who go over a manuscript at the request of an author or publisher, paying particular attention to certain identities, characterizations, or phrases. But okay, so hold on. Before you do,
Hmm.
doesn't that wouldn't that technically just be relatively an editor?
Well, that's the thing. The difference between the difference between an editor and a sensitivity reader is an editor um edits based on competency, coherence, and like objective grammatical structure and shit. A sensitivity reader or a censor edits based on morality. And to be fair, there was a time when the tradcon evangelical types did this too. In particular, there's a guy by the name of I believe it's Thomas Bowdler, who was basically for like England, the 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 tradcon evangelical version of a sensitivity reader. And then, of course, there's the more common, more fuck youable example of Frederick Wortham and the impetus behind the Comics Code Authority and their attempts to basically morally censor comics. And once again, once more with feeling, the correct answer in both cases is a resounding fuck all of you.
Right. Um, to be fair, not only is researching a skill, but it is a significant time investment. Like in making my setting, I have a bunch of research ahead of me, and hiring people to explain it would be a huge help. Yeah, it's fair.
Mhm.
Like honestly, like I think me and Dawn are well aware of like the research time and stuff. Like
Well, that, and it's also sometimes easier to pose questions to a person than it is to pose questions to a document, which
yeah,
is fair, but in general, a good balance of both forming your own informed opinion and finding an expert to bounce things off of, or at least an informed person to bounce things off of, um, is a good thing, and it's something that it's a skill that most of modern day writers have lost, and it's fucking annoying if they've lost it.
anyway, yeah, shall we continue?
Yes, we shall.
All right. Google the term though, and you'll find definitions as varied as they are subjective. The University of Alberta, for example, defines sensitivity readers as someone who reads for offensive content, while the Spectator goes with freelance copy editors who publishers pay to cancel proof their new books.
And again, when you say offensive, you are making an entirely moralistic judgment, and morality shouldn't enter into the equation anywhere. Like, like no matter what you advocate in a book, it shouldn't be censored. If you actually go ahead and do some heinous things that you previously had advocated in a book, that's a different thing. It's again, it's very similar to the free speech argument. I have no problem with Nazis advocating for gas chambers because I understand the power of argumentation, i.e., when a Nazi advocates for gas chambers, he can expect to get many, many shouts of, "Are you kidding? That's stupid," for X, Y, and Z reasons, and so on. If he actually goes ahead and tries to build the gas chambers, then by all means shoot him in the head. But simply advocating for the building of the gas chambers is not a moral fixation. It is something that can be argued against and will probably be argued against. Therefore, um, yeah, it's the difference between having an idea in your head or having words in your mouth or on a page and action. One of these things can be selected for, moral dispensation. The other cannot.
You know?
Yeah. Moving on.
First of all, a technical copy edit is different from what a sensitivity reader does, which is more along the lines of a content edit. Jenna Fistrom, Become, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Terrible with names. That's a running joke with me.
He's bad with naming.
I mean, if I hear it said to me, sure, I can say it, but a writer and
I mean, to be fair, it was like 6 months before you got my last name right, but that's neither here nor there.
You could have said something instead of making me look like an idiot for 6 months.
I was hoping you'd eventually get it on your own. I was optimistic but foolish.
Anyway, a writer and sensitivity reader actually prefers the term authenticity. Authenticity. No, it's not. How do you say the word, Don?
Authenticity?
Thank you. I can say authentic.
And
I can say authentic, but I can't. Okay, authenticity reader, because she believes it's more accurate. The idea is that a writer may be writing from or about an experience they themselves do not share, and they need the perspective of someone who's actually been there or is there.
Okay, but here's the thing. Even if I was to allow this, which I will not do, but even if I was to allow this as a thing that needed to exist, you need to get people of that background that have multiple different worldviews. You can't arbitrarily select one worldview or one set of moral prescriptions as the perspective of every single person in a goddamn demographic, because identities, particularly those based on demographics, are not goddamn hive minds. And if you think in your heart of hearts that demographics are hive minds, you're going to end up just arbitrarily selecting the opinions you like most and invalidating and morally grandstanding against any that you don't like. Which, correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole purpose of these alleged authenticity readers, quote unquote, which I will revoke your right to use that word in a second, but that's neither here nor there, because I'm the authenticator and I can do that. But in any case, even assuming that authenticity readers are a thing that needs to exist, I would think the logic behind their existence is you shouldn't arbitrarily select things about this demographic that you like over things you don't like. So, far be it for me to point this out, but the existence of this thing is null because the attempt to standardize the opinions of all people in a given demographic imply the very same selection bias that you're supposed to be counteracting. Your base premise for this is when people don't have external perspectives, they select for the things they do like and deselect for the things they don't like. Well, all you're doing is doing the same thing, but with added moral fervor. And again, morality doesn't belong anywhere in this conversation. It is a conversation about art and literature and shit. Morality has no place here. And frankly, in my philosophical epistemology, morality doesn't have any place in the public sphere, period. If I had my druthers, if I had my, Thanos snapping Infinity Gauntlet moment, I would alter the world so that all conversations about morality had to occur in the private sphere and had no place in the public one. But that's neither here nor there. And it's probably a good thing for the world that I don't have the Infinity Gauntlet, but that's neither here nor there. But side note, speaking as the authenticator, I hereby revoke your ability to use the word authenticity because you don't know what it means and you are using it in a moral context, which is the very last place where it belongs. Piss off.
Right. I love nothing more than being able to work with a writer to make their representation more authentic. Become says in an interview with Salon, I infinitely prefer having the opportunity to shape something before it's published to being stuck complaining about it after it's already out there causing problems. Become usually reads for deafness and sign language uses while writer, screenwriter, and sensitivity reader. Laura Amin reads for visible and invisible disabilities along with queer or Jewish characters or content.
Speaking as someone with a physical disability that I was freaking born with, I have spastic diplegic cerebral palsy, if anyone's curious, and also an anxiety disorder that almost made my heart explode once, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, between my chronic anxiety disorder, my optic nerve damage, and my spastic diplegic cerebral palsy, I feel justified in pointing this out that you can piss straight the fuck off when you talk about speaking on the behalf of people with disabilities. People with disabilities are perfectly capable of speaking for themselves, and the ones that aren't probably shouldn't be probably shouldn't be used as props in some kind of game of moral strip poker. Because frankly, I find that to be dehumanizing. The people with genuine communication issues who have the people with disabilities that have genuine communication issues should be facilitated to speak for themselves as much as possible, for one. And if there is no way of doing that, then they certainly shouldn't be used as glorified human props for someone else's moralistic narrative. Because if they're not competent to communicate for themselves because they have some kind of impairment in that regard, i.e., they're either psychologically or physically incapable of communicating, they shouldn't be filled with other people's moral fervor, because it's highly probable that they might not even understand the context of that moral fervor, even if you could communicate it to them. And there's also the problem of some people who can't technically communicate, nevertheless, are perfectly capable of forming their own opinions because their minds are perfectly fine, even though their bodies aren't. As an example, read the book Stuck in Neutral. There's a book that's of like a middle school reading level. It's called Stuck in Neutral. It's about a kid with far more severe cerebral palsy than I have, who is a quadriplegic rather than a diaplegic, and he is tragic. The book is somewhat tragic in the sense that he is perfectly capable of being a competent person mentally, but because he's essentially a vegetable, because his body essentially doesn't work, he is treated as a vegetable, even though his mind is perfectly functional and even to some degree hyper functional. But that's neither here nor there. So yeah, there are those people who can think fine and probably would disagree with you attempting to morally grandstand over them, but can't communicate it. There are people who can't communicate it and can't understand communication because of some mental impairment along with their physical impairment. And there are people who have no such problems with communication but are disabled, and so you would like to morally grandstand over them anyway. And for those people, I can definitely speak on the behalf of them and say, fuck off. Anyway, moving on. Actually, no. There's one other thing I want to say before we move on. This person said that um, they prefer being able to alter the writing before it comes out rather than complaining about it after the fact. Here's the thing. The world does not and should not revolve around your goddamn preferences, especially when your preferences are irrational, authoritarian, and censorious. You don't get special fucking treatment just because you can arbitrarily mime some sort of victimhood. Being forced to react to something after it comes out is how things should work. It's how everyone else gets along just fine. And it's how the world actually functions in a rational sort of way. Because the alternative to that is the idea contained within the art itself gets altered before it even makes it to the public, which is just arbitrarily stupid. Or, in the case of things that have already existed previously, like Goosebumps, like Roald Dahl, uh, like Ian Fleming, and so on and so forth, you are depriving new generations the ability to view the art as it was originally conveyed. And therefore, there's a high probability that some of the value contained within the thing might be lost in the translation. Imagine a world where younger generations never learn why James Bond is awesome. Not because it's not actually awesome, and not because they wouldn't prefer to like James Bond, but because their conception of James Bond is different from the original conception of James Bond. I.e., there's people who would like it as it was originally written, but wouldn't like the moralistically sanitized version. And those people have actually had something taken from them. They have less options of things to like because you decided that what they would have liked is too morally impure, and they don't have any impetus to like the thing that is morally censored. Moving on. Well, I mean that's true. That's true, Dragon Turtle. But my point is that she wants special dispensation because of her preferences, um, rather than having to write reviews and criticize things after the fact, like every other fucking person on the planet, which is wrong, frankly. No, not only is it wrong to get the option to preferential treatment, it's wrong also to even want those things in the first place, frankly.
So well, it's a good thing you were talking with Dragon Troll on that because I was just finishing up eating. So.
Mm-hmm.
Contrary to some circulating beliefs, sensitivity readers don't hate books; they love them. Amin tells Salon, as a writer myself, it feels good to help shape an author's book to the best shape it can be. I read a ton. I love reading, so it's the perfect job for me, and I learn something with each project I take on. Both Amin and
Again,
hold on, it's one more sentence. I did full time.
mm-hmm.
Both Amin and Become describe their process as reading carefully, taking notes, and writing up their findings, questions, and ideas for the writer or publisher. So before I do have like one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that effectively just the job of an editor, or supposed to be at least?
Again, no, because they're not talking about grammatical errors, objective issues, or some kind of length or context issue. They're talking about making something morally better.
I know. I'm just saying though. That does sound awfully a lot like how an editor is supposed to work as well.
Yeah, it's essentially a moral editor,
Okay.
and therein lies the problem. Morality shouldn't enter into conversation anywhere. Also, worth noting, the way you described that, my dear, means that you, a person who did not create the thing you are editing, get to change the context of a original piece of work from someone who did come up with it originally, or in my epistemology, channeled it originally, without the obligation to be a good author. I.e., rather than write your own shit, rather than write your own stories with your own messaging and your own, attempts to communicate to the world, you would rather filter someone else's work and impede their ability to get their original content put into the world, and you think you're in the right to do this. You think it is righteous for you, a non-author, to insert your own filters, not the filters of the original author, not the filters of the work, not the filters of the publisher, but your own personal filters, and essentially piggyback off of the ideas of someone else and actively impede and obstruct the ability for people to obtain whatever that original content was. And you're not doing it based on quality. You're not doing it based on objective coherence or objective, writing competency. You're doing it based on morality. A morality which, by its very nature, was not originally present in the book, because if it was originally present in the book, you would not have to edit it. And you think you're in the right to basically be an authorial leech. You consider it a moral duty to leech off of the quality of someone else's work. Piss all the way off, you sanctimonious cunt. Ugh. Yeah, but moving on.
I mean, if it was a consultant, I could understand. Sure.
And I could also here's the other thing. If it was someone that the author themselves had asked for, like if it was a goal of the author themselves to do a thing, and then they got an expert in to help them do that thing, that is one thing. But number one, it's not. This person is being treated with the same level of authority as an editor, as we just went over. Number two, they're not hired by the authors individually; they're hired by the company. And number three, those suggestions that they make, that list of ideas and exceptions, because it's treated as sacrosanct as a editor's position. In a lot of cases, the author doesn't have an option the author doesn't have an option to refuse those ideas. I.e., if the sensitivity reader gives suggestions and the author refuses them, the publisher has every right, legally speaking, to refuse to publish based on that. I.e., if you refuse the moral arbitrations of the sensitivity reader that the publisher hired, the publisher might refuse to actually publish your book if you refuse their suggestions. In exactly the same way as they might refuse if you turn down the suggestions of an editor. And therein lies the problem. One of these editors is based on competency and objective, writing rigor and so on. And one of these people, one of these editors, is doing it based on morality, and that morality cannot be refused. which leads me back to the fuck all the way off, you evil cunt. Moving on.
Usually I pay attention to the character or characters the editor or the author asks me to read for. But I also look at the whole novel or nonfiction work and make suggestions to replace ableist language or phrases. Amin says, for disabled characters, I'll examine if the author has used any of the common tropes or stereotypes associated with disability representation.
Okay. I am now going to, within your own worldview, completely destroy you, okay? Because one of those stereotypes that disabled people and characters get saddled with in almost everything they're fucking in, mind you, is the idea that they have to be saved because they're so fragile and vulnerable that they can't hold up to the slightest bit of scrutiny. And you, as the sensitivity reader, your entire job within the context of, editing for disabled characters is to literally assume that your potentially disabled readership is so fragile that they cannot cope with the phrasing of a given character's character or a given character's personality or mannerisms or story arc or whatever. Do you or do you not think that that constitutes a harmful stereotype of disabled people? Also, worth noting, a common trope among disabled characters that I fucking hate, and I know for a fact that many other disabled people that I've known also fucking hate, is what I like to call the Tiny Tim syndrome, i.e., the assumption that the hardships disabled characters go through makes them morally pure by default and or innocent. Again, think of the Tiny Tim syndrome. Or another way of phrasing this is the child cancer patient syndrome.
Actually, can I bring up an example?
Yeah.
Like to counteract that. I'm best friends with Dalton Mortimer, aka the Authenticator.
Mm-hmm.
And he is. If it wasn't for me, I'm sure he would have been a supervillain by now.
I'm not a good person. I really exist as the counter to this point. But yes,
it's not that you're not a good person. I think you're very much an asshole.
I have no patience for morality, I think is the best way of phrasing it. Largely because of bullshit like this. But that's neither here nor there. But my point, in relation to my previous point, is that one of the tropes that happens to disabled characters all the freaking time is that tiny Tim syndrome, or that wiser beyond their years syndrome, where disabled characters will just arbitrarily become the most innocent, most morally pure characters they can because presumably their hardship has made them that way or some shit. And when that happens, it's based on the assumption that disabled people are more pure because of the hardships they face. And far be it from me to presume this, but what do you think is going to happen when you literally select out certain storylines for disabled characters based on the fact that it might make them look immoral or might make them be framed in an immoral way? You're basically going to institute, by fiat, the Tiny Tim syndrome or the child cancer patient syndrome that I hate. Basically every disabled character in fiction, almost to a fault, gets treated like the goddamn Dalai Lama. The idea that their hardship has made them so morally sacrosanct and morally pure that they're basically like Aang from Avatar. Now, granted, there's the flip side of this trope, which I also kind of hate, which is the character who compensates for their disability by being overly tough. Which tough is a good Toph is an example of this possibly done more right than usual, but between the Toph from Avatar: The Last Airbender and the Joe Swanson type characters, that extreme also pisses me off, because if they have to shun their disability that hard, it basically still amounts to their life revolving around their disability.
Okay, so sorry, side tangent. I will make the argument mainly because I think obviously over the years, because Seth MacFarlane has more or less been forced to make Family Guy, he's kind of given a lot of the characters cynical edge because they didn't start out as like super bad. You know, Joe Swanson was despite being in a wheelchair, was actually a pretty cool dude and an amazing cop.
Yeah, there's some flanderization going on. I was trying to think of other examples of a character compensating for their disability with some kind of physical strength, which kind of defeats the whole goddamn purpose. Frankly, one of the best disabled characters to ever exist in anything is Elijah Price, Mr. Glass, because he doesn't shun his physical disability. He doesn't try to compensate for it in any way, and it doesn't make him morally pure or morally sacrosanct or innocent. He's a highly competent, highly intellectual character who lives with their disability and actually manages to make it work without actively shunning it, which is a good thing.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
Right. While much of their work involves books, they also sometimes read textbooks, articles, graphic novels, even video games. Going to Be Home, who says she pretty much never turns down a request. Sometimes I take a deep breath because I know this one will be a humdinger, but that also energizes me.
Okay, wait. Let go back and read through that again, because I just want to make sure I heard that correctly. Did she actually say that sensitivity readers have carte blanche to edit textbooks on moral grounds?
Yeah, which while much of their work involves books, they also sometimes read textbooks, articles, graphic novels, even video games. Going to Be Home, who says she pretty much never turns down a request. Sometimes I take a deep breath because I know this one will be a humdinger. That also energizes me.
Okay, so you are editing nonfiction on moral grounds.
Yeah, she actually said that earlier.
But textbooks, as in the things people use to get educated with, are being edited based on moral grounds. Holy fucking hell, that is some Orwellian shit. As in, reality is morally impure, so we have to fix it so people don't know about the immorality of reality. That's what you've officially done then. Like, I never thought we would get to the left wing equivalent of um Christian biology textbooks not mentioning evolution at all. Um, but we've gotten there officially. They edit textbooks based on morality. Mind you, that the only textbooks I can imagine need to be edited for morality in this way, even within their framework, would probably be history textbooks. So yeah, they're literally rewriting the textbooks based on history, most likely, on the grounds that the past was immoral. And they don't understand why we think they have a fuck ton of power. That I hesitate to use the word evil because frankly I find that term to be overused, and of course there's the usual Hanlon's razor of never attribute to malice but can adequately be expressed by incompetence. And I'm still not attributing it to malice. I'm still not going to do I'm still not going to do that. But frankly, sometimes you can be immoral or evil without realizing it, and this is one of those times. You are bragging about how you morally edit textbooks, which I assume to be history textbooks, because what other kind of textbook would you need to morally edit in that way? And you are essentially bragging about it, and you don't understand how that correlates to you having a fuck ton of power. If you can control how people are educated, that gives you a fuck ton of power regardless. And the fact that you're doing it based on moral grounds makes it infinitely worse.
Right. Moving on.
Moving on.
Okay. I did thinking like if we're still doing this for like another hour, and we're not done yet. I do think we'll try to call and move on. Like finish it next week. Do authors and publishers listen to their suggestions? Sometimes. Become Tongues Solange often has to sign NDAs, and then also just generally make a practice of not linking my name to a project unless I have read the final version and have signed off on it. Even the projects where the creators were super receptive, there are often still things that make me wince a bit, and I don't really want people to think that I specifically approved that element.
I mean, it's good that you have some humanity left and don't just arbitrarily decide your morality is better than all the things. But I still am on the category of you shouldn't be doing this at all. Your job is actually harmful. You're you are essentially being paid to be the Ministry of Truth, or at the very least, the Ministry of Art. Even if, like, if we're not throwing in the textbooks and all the nonfiction editing, you're at the very least preventing people from expressing art in any proper way, which in and of itself is almost worse. But then you throw in the fact that you're actually editing textbooks and nonfiction for moral reasons, and then my brain rage quits. I refuse to entertain this anymore any further than fuck off, piss off, and die in the metaphoric hole. Um, as to what Dragon Turtle said, yes, Dragon Turtle, I'm well aware that they probably would edit all textbooks, but what I'm saying is that um or what I was attempting to say was the type of textbook most likely to be edited is probably the history textbook because of all of the nasty immoralities of the past, quote unquote. Sure, I could see them editing STEM textbooks too, or like literature textbooks too and stuff, but um there's only so much damage that is justifiable in that context, whereas I can literally imagine them getting a way to rewrite history carte blanche on moral grounds because of quote unquote sensitivity reading.
And to be fair, we never even now we never even learned much about uh, history. Like
Yeah, I mean the American educational system is a clusterfuck. Let's not beat around that particular bush anyway. But there's a difference between the American educational system being a clusterfuck and literally being propaganda. And this appears to be crossing that line. Like like the incompetence of the American educational system is storied and legendary at this point. But at the very least, when there's not a moral bias to it, the incompetence is universal and well-meaning and can be chalked up to Hanlon's razor. When there's a moral bias to education, it's a full order of magnitude worse.
you know.
Yeah, moving on.
Okay. There are limits to the power of a sensitivity reader, hard limits. At the end of the day, the readers don't have the writing ability or veto power of editors. While writers are almost always appreciative of my feedback, they solicited, after all. It does definitely happen too that none or only some of my suggestions are taken on board. That's just how it goes. Beacom says, if I say I think it would be strengthened if you did X, and they say, yeah, no, I don't want to, that's where it ends. They have no particular power to compel them to make changes. I mean, it's
Okay, this just got yet more creepy. That's not you saying I would not take that power. That's not you saying I'm glad I don't have that power. That's not you saying no one should have that power. That's you fucking regretting that you don't have the power to compel people to take your advice. And by the way, it doesn't really matter if you ha- personally have the power to arbitrate this, because very often the publishers will do it on your behalf. Because sensitivity readers are, to many degrees, held to roughly the same level of authority as an editor. They might be under the editor in terms of authority, but very often it's the editor who asks the sensitivity reader to oversee a particular work. And if the author in question refuses the sensitivity reader, the editor might pull rank and refuse to publish, or the publisher itself might refuse to publish based on not cooperating with the sensitivity reader. So it doesn't matter if you personally have this authority, if as long as that authority actually does exist. But in any case, you are not taking a hardline principled stance of I am glad I don't have this authority. You are wistfully regretting, like you are basically whining that you don't have that authority, and that's your only out. Your only out at this point is I don't have the authority that I want. That doesn't mean I don't want it. That doesn't mean I wouldn't take it if it were offered to me, and it doesn't mean that other people can't enforce it on my behalf. I just don't de facto have that. Like I don't de jure have that authority, even if de facto I might kind of. Like that is your only out. Your only out is I don't have the authority I would otherwise want to have. In which case, once again, fuck off, you Orwellian piece of shit. No, not I am now increasingly more convinced that you are an authoritarian with no self-awareness, because you're not objecting to the things you might do on principled grounds. You're not objecting based on moral grounds. You're not saying no one should have the power to do these things. You are publicly regretting. You wrote this article on the premise that don't worry, everyone, sensitivity readers don't have enough power to do this thing. Even though I want the power to do this thing, and even though I consider it regrettable that I don't have the power to do this thing. And you don't understand why that's creepy. That's like a politician saying, "Sure, I don't have the power to send you all to Gitmo and basically open up a gulag, but if I did, it would probably be a good thing." That's what you just did there. No, also never mind that other people might do it, and I won't have any issues with it, because that's the other thing. Again, the sensitivity reader themselves might not have that power, but the editor does, and the publisher does, and very often, if the author in question refuses the advice, quote unquote, of the sensitivity reader, the publishers and editors will pull rank and refuse to publish based on that grounds, because to varying degrees, the sensitivity reader is regarded basically as a secondary editor.
moving on. Or,
Yes.
okay. Okay. As Amin put it, all I can do is offer them suggestions and hope they find it useful.
Again, that doesn't fill me with hope or get you off the freaking hook here, because because you literally sound like you are whining and asking for more power.
Right.
You literally sound as though you are asking, I wish I had this power. Won't somebody please give it to me? That's what you're doing. Or or that is what it looks for all the world like you are doing. And it is one of the most horrifying things I think I've ever seen in one of these articles. And that is saying a fuck ton. Like this is like do you want Big Brother? Because this is how you get Big Brother. When people are actually regretting on moral grounds that they don't have the power to enforce their moral wills on other people, is how you get Big Brother. And Jesus Christ, it's terrifying.
All right. Here's a tweet from Incunabala, I think. I'm happy to be corrected, but it looks to me like the words black and fat in particular have been removed in their entirety from the 2022 Puffin editions of Roald Dahl's works, i.e., they have been deleted or replaced wherever they occurred, absolutely regardless of context. I'll let Matt in Telegraph have the last word. And there's a picture here where on at a bookstore where the sign says just in Roald Dahl's Charlie and the Quinoka Factory. Quinoa Factory. I feel like that's another word for chocolate.
Yes, yes, it is.
That's stupid. Chocolate has nothing. What?
Because chocolate originally came from Mesoamerica, so they want to use the original Mesoamerican word for it. That's the logic.
Although that does give me a weird like parody movie of like Willy Wonka set in like Mexico, which honestly seems kind of funny.
I mean, the Oompa Loompas sort of are fairly transparent inserts for various like Mesoamerican tribes.
Especially that the Tim Burton movie, right?
I mean I loved the Tim Burton version.
Oh yeah, no, it's fun. I'm just.
And it is a lot more accurate to the book, frankly, but that's neither here nor there.
Uh,
But yeah, the Oompa Loompas have always been kind of a surrogate for uh not insert random Mesoamerican tribe here. With regards to
Carlito and the Quinoka Factory.
yeah, they want to change Charlie's name because again, Mesoamerican thing.
No, I'm just no like if that the parody movie, you know, be funny.
What would the like Spanish or Mesoamerican version of Charlie be?
Carlos
Yeah, I think it would be Carlos.
or Carlito?
Carlos and the Juanita Factory.
Although if we're playing the ball where it lies, it'd have to be entirely in Spanish.
Yeah. We'd have to figure out what the Spanish word for factory was.
Look that up. Now we're going down a rabbit hole here.
Dragon Turtle, I honestly don't know. I lean towards no, but I have heard some people actually say it's like the V thing, the play the new meta thing, regardless of whether the new meta is in any way defensible thing. So in that sense, yes, there are people who would gladly acquiesce to authoritarianism even if it weren't their rules,
Okay.
as long as it was the new meta, quote unquote. But and of course, COVID showed a lot of that as well. The idea that we know the government is doing a stupid thing, but it's the approved and regulated stupid thing, so everyone do it anyway.
Right, okay. Uh,
That being said, that doesn't mean we should encourage that tendency.
Okay, so Carlito and the Conoca La Fabrica. Yeah.
Yeah, the play the new meta regardless of whether the new meta actually makes any goddamn sense thing. I always cringe a little bit to that. It's like you know the for all of your let's play the new meta, I can't help but notice that in your country for a while there, communism was the new meta. And you seem very, very heavily opposed to that.
Shall we?
Yeah, moving on.
Mm-hmm. And yet, sensitivity readers were specifically and quickly assigned the responsibility and the fault for the changes proposed by Dull's work. The group that read Dull's books, Inclusive Minds, does even not call themselves sensitivity readers, but instead a network of young people, that's your first mistake, with many different lived experiences who are willing to share their insight to help publishers in the process of creating authentically and often incidentally inclusive books.
Okay, but that whole like 2 sentences you just read out there is basically a euphemism. It doesn't matter if they call themselves sensitivity readers. The question is, do they functionally do they substantively amount to sensitivity readers? And in which case, the answer is fuck off. In fact, the answer is fuck off regardless, but the question here is, does them calling themselves sensitivity readers or not prevent them from being sensitivity readers regardless? And the answer is no. They can be sensitivity readers without calling themselves that because the power of euphemism compels you.
Sorry, I didn't finish that. I thought there was a period there. That was the quote. It wasn't the end of the sentence. The organization said in a statement when reached for comment by someone. So, yeah, my bad. Let me move on or anything else? Or...
Sorry, I'm reading Dragon Turtle's comments. I know I know Dragon Turtle. I know that's what his stance is, but in any case, that the thing that bothers me with that is that in his version of things, using his base premise as the guidepost, if communism made a comeback in Romania, he would be sitting there advocating, well, we obviously can't fix communism, so just take as much advantage of it as possible while it's here, and eventually it will come crumbling down, and that will be good. And it's like you could just counter the communism to begin with. Like if the new meta doesn't make any sense, you could advocate for an alternative. Yeah, I know. That's why it bothers me. It's like how far exactly are you willing to take advantage of the new meta approach, V? Because I can't help but point out that you're sitting there in Eastern Europe in frickin' Romania, and the history of keep your head down and just play the new meta in Romania in particular is kind of a perfect example of why you shouldn't just keep your head down and play the new meta. It's like people who say I don't agree with the law, but I'm still going to follow it. It's like, well, if the law doesn't make any goddamn sense or isn't morally justifiable, then fuck the law. Like we all collectively understand that sometimes the law gets shit wrong. So why would you why would you attempt to follow a law that you know doesn't make any sense or is immoral? It, especially when you consider that so many people will arbitrarily break small laws like it's nothing. Like let he who is without a dozen, pirated TV shows cast the first stone. And nobody can because everyone pirates shit as well they should because piracy laws make no fucking sense. But I'm the same way with regards to most things. It's like the burden is on you to make sense, and the second you stop making sense, I will disregard your laws. Like if the laws don't make any sense, then I will ignore them. I take that initiative. And if the new meta doesn't make any sense, then I will oppose the new meta as and when it happens. Anyway, moving on.
Da, 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 da. This process is not about cutting potentially controversial content, but rather about including and embedding authenticity and inclusive voices and experiences from the outset. Statement goes on.
Based on whose definition, and those two things aren't mutually exclusive. In fact, one of those things can often be used as a justification for the other, and therein lies the problem. It doesn't matter how much you claim it isn't about X. If X ends up being the end result, then it's ultimately a distinction without a difference. And also, very often, your attempts to be authentic and inclusive, which again, I revoke your right to use the word authentic because fuck you. But in any case, your attempts to be authentic and inclusive require you to morally arbitrate who is in the hive mind of blackness, i.e., who does speak for all black people everywhere, all gay people everywhere, all disabled people everywhere, and who does not. Because there are people of those demographics that don't agree with your proposed hive mind. And so you have to either aug- uh, augment or alter your definition of that demographic, which you never fucking do, because that would require you to include people of different worldviews in your definition of that demographic, or you have to arbitrarily deselect out people who are in that demographic but simply don't agree with you as somehow morally invalid. And in that case, you are only serving your ideas of that community or that demographic, not the actual community. Especially because very often, not that this particularly makes that much of a difference, but very often the percentage of people within a given demographic that disagree with your proposed hive mind is actually significantly larger of a plurality than the people who do agree with your proposed hive mind. And yet that never seems to come up. Even though even though most women are not feminists, even though most black people don't like Black Lives Matter, even though most gay people are not in favor of LGBT activism, even though most disabled people freaking hate the condescending pity spoiled in their direction at any given interval. Um, and I can speak for quite a lot of those, frankly. Um, even though all of this is true, even though the demographic hive minds you propose are not applicable to the lion's share of the people you want to apply them to, your assumption is that the people who shun that hive mind are wrong, and the people who embrace the hive mind are right. For no reason other than it makes more sense to you. Which is exactly the kind of mentality you're supposed to be avoiding with all of this authenticity and sensitivity crap. Never mind that most people don't actually want it. Because most people who are in any way like have any care for their particular demographic, i.e. they that want some kind of representation, would like it to be outside of any sort of moral structure, i.e. they just want good characters who happen to be of their demographic. If they even care about their demographic, most people frankly don't even get that far. I.e. they don't care about the demographic of the character, they just gravitate to whatever characters they like, because those characters are awesome and fun and qualitative.
Right. I do want to apologize if anyone heard that. I forgot to mute my phone. Yeah, I always, in case anyone didn't know, I mute my phone during during the podcast, so it's not distracting. But yeah, I can't do that. So. All right. Moving on. Right?
Dragon Turtle, the solution is for people who make laws to simply make laws that are rational and actually make sense. I get what you're getting at, the idea of if everyone considers laws optional, then eventually anarchy. But here's the thing. My proviso is I reserve the right to refute any laws that don't make sense. So the obvious solution is make laws that freaking make sense, or at the very least have some kind of underlying logic to them.
And I will be fair. I do want to cut that because that could be a whole conversation itself for hours on end.
Mm-hmm.
And we gotta get through this stuff because we're still on just the first article. So like I said, if you guys want to have this conversation like in the Discord sometime later, please go ahead.
We have to move. I would respond to what you just wrote, but yeah, we're moving forward.
Yeah.
But no, I'm not. Just to be clear, I'm not ignoring you. It's just we have shit to do.
Yeah. On any project, it's the role of the Inclusive Minds ambassador to help identify language and portrayals that could be inauthentic or problematic, and to highlight why, as well as indicate potential solutions. The publisher and/or author then have all the information to make informed decisions regarding what changes they wish to make to manuscripts and illustrations. For clarity, Inclusive Minds do not edit or rewrite text, but provide valuable comments, all italics, and bold statements.
Comments that authors very often do not have leisure to refuse, because the editor or publisher will pull rank on the author if they refuse the assistance of the aforementioned moral cavalcade. And again, I must point out that as a disabled person who is also gay, and yeah, all of the other various diversity credentials I have, I consider this moral arbitration from without and above to be inauthentic to my lived experience. What the fuck now? Answer: you consider me invalid because I have internalized self-hatred or some shit. And therein lies the exact problem. You will not amend your conception based on reality or based on people's opinions or based on the actual data. You will invalidate the people who don't conform to your conception. Because that's the thing. If you at least made some effort to amend your conception so that it was in line with what people actually wanted and or considered substantive and valid, I could at the very least see where you were coming from. But you never ever alter your framework. You only ever consider anyone outside of your framework to be immaterial, or at the very least or counterproductive, or very often immoral. So it's not your fault for creating a conception of these demographics that doesn't actually apply to anything. It's the demographics' fault for not conforming to your conception. In which case, again, and for the record, you can fuck off. There is nothing authentic about this, and that's why I, as the authenticator, evoke my right to tell you to fuck off and stop using that word because you don't have any conception of what it means. Moving on.
Right, okay. Mislabeling the group and assigning blame to young people for the dull changes seems like a clear case of punching down on the part of the publishers.
Gen Z don't agree with you either. Again, stop trying to speak on the behalf of demographics. You don't have the moral authority of all demographics because demographics are not hive minds. And in most cases, the demographics that you attempt to speak for actually prefer not to be spoken for in that way. As a general rule, the people who oppose your conception of them actually usually outweigh the people who are in favor of your conception of them. And almost always, these conceptions are academic constructs that come from without the community, i.e., black people didn't make the concept of blackness. A bunch of hoity-toity um, pseudo-intellectual academics did, and then exported it back to the black community. Gay people didn't make the concept of the LGBT community. It was made by some hoity-toity academic who may or may not have been gay, and then exported backwards, and so on and so forth. So if we're really talking about authenticity, i.e., from the original perspective of the people involved in the community, then surely the first thing to go is this notion of authenticity and representation, because none of the people in this community actually came up with it on their own. Only the people who were programmed by academia were. And those people are often regarded as hoity-toity pseudo-intellectuals by the people that they're claiming to speak on the behalf of, whether or not they were originally part of that demographic to begin with, which very often they are not, which is the other thing. Very often, it's privileged upper middle class or upper class white bitches claiming to know what goes on in the minds of black men's heads or gay men's heads or disabled people's heads. And you're 0 for 3 on that assumption. You don't know what goes on in any person's head more than they do. Not even other white people, frankly. The only people you could potentially speak on the behalf of is yourself, but that is the one person you will never speak on the behalf of. Because if you attempted to speak on the behalf of yourself and only yourself, you would have to come to terms with the fact that your ideas make no sense and don't hold up to goddamn scrutiny. So instead of being intellectually honest and speaking for yourself and only yourself, you attempt to inflate your authority in the matter by speaking on the behalf of an entire demographic when that entire demographic does not agree with you. And very often the conception that you export to the people who do agree with you is one of your own devising and not theirs. Moving on.
Okay. Publishers may also not put sensitivity readers' suggestions into practice very well. Witness the initial censoring of the words like "fat" and "dull," but no changes to the derogatory context in which the words appear. Okay, that's just
So
on changing the context of a story. Like that, that's not even censorship at that point. That's revisioning.
yeah, and again, your only complaint is I have no problem with them doing this, it's just they don't do it well enough. You don't even see how bizarre it is that you presuppose that altering people's texts in this way is a good thing to begin with. It doesn't even occur to you that what you're doing is wrong, full stop, no matter how effective it is. Again, your criticism is I would like to have the power to do this properly, but I don't have enough power to do this to accomplish this goal that I have. It doesn't even occur to you that the goal itself might be wrong. Moving on.
And while Fleming's books were edited for racist content, misogynistic content, including that women love semi grape, I don't want to say that word, still remains, as pointed out by The Guardian. Perhaps publishers need to hire some of these sensitivity readers as actual staff editors with more power to make nuanced change.
again, your only solution is I don't have enough power to accomplish this goal, so give me more power. It doesn't even occur to you that this goal in and of itself is wrong. And here's another thing that you don't seem to ever want to consider. You don't seem to ever want to consider that misogyny might not be a thing, or that at the very least it doesn't exist in the material you're talking about. You presuppose that misogyny A exists and exists where you personally can identify it. It doesn't even occur to you that people don't in general hate women. No one ever hates women as a whole or as a demographic, and any harm that does come to women as a whole or as a demographic in any given culture is usually the result of patronizing love gone wrong rather than any kind of hatred. Misogyny is not a thing for the most part. You literally have to be brain damaged to be misogynistic because human people, people of the genus Homo sapien, bond with their caregivers and maternal figures as a general rule, as a whole. Like, this has been a thing since before we, you know, discarded our fur as a species. It's been a thing since before we came down from the freaking trees. Homo sapiens bond with their maternal figures, and those maternal figures are almost all women. And as the data shows, women in general have an in-group preference, i.e., women on balance would prefer to be involved with other women, and men, as a general rule, partially because of their maternal bonds and partially because most men are straight, also prefer the company of women over men, i.e., women have an in-group preference, but men actually, according to the data, have an out-group preference, i.e., men would rather actually deal with women than other men. But you never seem to want to address that little canard or how that might imply some kind of species-wide misanthropy or misandry on our species' part. You only ever want to focus on misogyny, even though the data does not bear out that misogyny even exists in a large enough scale to matter.
Moving on, or
I don't understand your point there, Dragon Shuttle. Moving on.
okay. Uh, which leads to an important point about sensitivity readers: who's doing the sensitivity reading, and who's doing the writing, publishing, and profiting off of these stories. We don't get much representation generally, but when we do, it is overwhelmingly created by hearing people. Beacom says, this means that many misconceptions, some merely annoying, some downright dangerous, are regurgitated. Uh, Sensitivity readers like Beacom and Amin are creative artists in their own right, and they're looking for a chance. Beacom just finished writing the young adult novel that she couldn't find when she was a newly deaf teenager. And Amin, who is also a PhD student, is working on an adult urban fantasy novel, adapting it from her own pilot script, and has a story in the upcoming anthology, Being Ace. They're doing difficult, misunderstood, and essential work as sensitivity readers, but they also want to tell their own stories too. It's so important that for that cycle to be broken, Beacom says, for the representation to be authentic.
So it's not enough that you have this position as a moral arbiter, which is basically what you're doing. You want to have this position as a moral arbiter and be treated on the same level as authors. In fact, you want to replace the authors that you don't like with yourselves, as well as morally grandstand and morally arbitrate all things. How narcissistic and entitled could you possibly conceivably fucking be? You don't even seem to appreciate the fact that you're morally censorious and paid for that in and of itself. No, Dragon Turtle, I'm saying that misogyny doesn't exist on an evolutionary scale. Period. The only people who exhibit actual misogyny are people on the cluster B spectrum, and that's because of trauma. That's because they never formed those neurologically healthy bonds with their maternal caregivers. Period.
Anyway,
Misogyny is misogyny is on a species wide scale, not a thing. Period.
again, and like, I don't mean to be an asshole about this, obviously, but it's just again for time purposes, I do. Like, if you guys want to actually have like a full-on discussion about this, I suggest like just talk about it somewhere else. Obviously, it's just time wise, we don't have. Anyway, moving on to the thing we were actually going to cover the first time, but didn't.
Yeah, because this is basically kind of a commentary on the previous article.
Okay,
That's why I wanted to do the previous article first.
right, that's fair. Okay, so like I said, like I said earlier, we swapped over to the original one, to the other one. This is from the escapistmagazine.com. From Roald Dahl to R.L. Stein, books are being rewritten. Doesn't matter. Written by Damien Lardorn. And published March 21st, 2023.
Dragon Turtle. I'm not making a philosophical point this time. This is a factual claim I am making. The only people who exhibit anything that could meaningfully be called misogyny are people who do not bond with their maternal caregivers. Because we as a species are inherently gynocentric. We always have been, again, pretty much since we came down from the frickin' trees. Misogyny is not a thing on an evolutionary scale. There are very rare exceptions, but they are neurologically deviant exceptions, usually as the result of either a birth defect or trauma. But I refuse to entertain the notion of widespread misogyny on the grounds of the very few and far between people who were either traumatized or neurologically deviant, because of a birth defect. And those are the only circumstances in which anything that could meaningfully be called misogyny physically is capable of existing in our species. It does not exist on a society-wide or evolutionary-wide scale because we as a species are gynocentric, factually speaking. Moving on.
Do I need to? You want me to reread the title again, or?
No, I think we can go forward.
Okay. Classic literature is under assault. Classic literature is being kept up to date. These are two key conflicting positions arising from recent revelations in the literary world. The latest is that Goosebumps publisher Scholastic has revised the children's horror series to make the books more inclusive.
And again, I want to point out this, but your attempts to be inclusive very often result in most of the people who you claim to be wanting to include being invalidated because most of the people you claim to want to include don't agree with your framework of them or your conception of them, and you are more obsessed with actualizing your conception of a certain group of people than actually amending your conception to fall in line with what people actually think. Moving on.
Before that, Ian Fleming's James Bond stories were subject to the consideration of sensitivity readers, and kicking off this latest flurry of debate around censorship of literature was that the works of much beloved children's author Roald Dahl had suffered edits. These all follow grievances as about six Dr. Seuss books being retired a couple years ago. What?
Yep, they got rid of several Dr. Seuss books because they were immoral now.
What the fuck? Dr.
Yep.
Seuss.
Yep.
I'm curious which ones because I've read plenty of them. I read plenty of them when I was a kid.
It's not. I don't think it's many of the major ones. I'd have to go back and I'm surprised we haven't covered this before. The whole selective cancellation of Dr. Seuss books thing. If I failed to suggest them for any of the shows, I'm sorry. But yeah, no, they've come for Dr. Seuss because even Dr. Seuss is not morally pure enough now. And Amazon and other publishers have actually declined to publish certain Dr. Seuss books because of morality.
It's fucking dumb.
It's sad, is what it is, because those books don't exist anymore. Basically, I obviously, I mean, the physical copies that were published previously still exist and everything, but like they'll never be published until we get out of this mindset. So, for all intents and purposes, those books aren't even being made anymore.
Anyway,
Uh,
moving on.
I'm just glad it's not any of the major ones yet, but who knows? It might eventually be. And
Moving on.
the world will have lost Dr. Seuss. Anyway, moving forward.
Much has been made of these events and what they might mean in the ongoing war for the future of literature. For that war is one of several fronts. Beyond the question of censorship versus sensitivity are two other concerns. The first are that the book bans that have taken place in parts of the United States. The other is the rise of generative text programs, including ChatGPT, which enable the writing of creative works with minimal human input. Disparate through though these issues seem, taken together, they strike to the heart of the question of the value of literature and its role in society. What?
They're going to try to justify it. They're basically asking the question. They're not to their credit, they're not even denying that it's happening. They're going straight to the it's happening, but it might be a good thing.
It's fucking dumb.
At least they're not denying that it's happening. So like the article we just covered was like, why are you so worried about sensitivity readers? We don't have any power. Proceeds to explain how much power they have. Moving on.
Maybe that's why these debates are most continuous when they center around children's books, as evidenced by the limp response to the situation with Ian Fleming compared to that with Roald Dahl. Children's books are frequently explicitly didactic. One of those most famous works, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, is an example, acting as a warning against snobbishness, avarice, gluttony, and other traits that correlate with age-old ideas of sin. Bearing in mind this idea that stories may influence now how children act, the ideological rationale for revising them becomes clear.
No, the ideological rationale for revising them becomes stupid at that point because it's denying the reason why we care more about children's books being stifled in this way is because if you don't show things to children when if you don't show things to children at some point while they're young, they might never know what they're missing. Essentially, like if so much of our artistic and philosophical and story related premises or preferences come from um when we were children. So many of us have so many fond memories of the stuff were first exposed to when we were children. And if if we never expose children to those things, we are actually depriving them of something that is meaningful. That's why that's why we care more about when it happens to children's books. Granted, I care either way because fuck censorship, especially on moral grounds. But yeah, if if there is to be said to be a rationale for why we care more when it happens to children's books, it's because we understand the notion that children are still cooking for lack of a better phrase. Like they're still maturing and becoming full-fledged beings. And so if we deny something to them when they're young, they might not ever even understand that they might not ever even know what they're missing. And that's a travesty to deny children the good things in life, especially on moral grounds. That's why the phrase "won't somebody please think of the children" used to be something we all rightfully mocked back in the 90s and early 2000s. That's that's the whole point of the Helen Lovejoy meme is the attempt to protect children by stifling them and by censoring them and by preventing them from experiencing the world is a hysterical travesty that should be laughed at best and actively destroyed at worst. Moving on.
Right. Certain child care for that logic. That can also mean forcing kids into certain stuff so they exposed to it, for example, for a long time if an acquired taste, or shielding them from harmful influences.
I prefer not to bring up the question of free will, Dragon Turtle,
Oh,
because
no, okay, look, that was from
I'm
um,
I'm not I'm not de facto convinced that free will is a thing. I'm a determinist, but that's neither here nor there. Um, but I I don't think that by ignoring that I'm therefore saying they're not responsible. I'm simply descriptively explaining how we get from there to there. Doesn't doesn't mean we shouldn't judge people for doing wrong things, but we should also actually understand why they do wrong things.
so kind of relating to the comment he recently made, which is careful with that logic. That can also mean uh, forcing kids into certain stuff so they are exposed to it for a long time if an acquired taste, or shielding them from harmful influences. Regarding to this article,
Ah, I see. Well, just to be clear, I'm not advocating for that. I'm not advocating for forcing children into things. I am advocating for leaving things alone and letting children come to them on their own terms. I.e., rather than warping children's growth joint, you should let them experience the world in as safe a way as they can on their own terms. Because normally the things that parents want children to consume are the things children least want to consume. Whereas the things they discover on their own terms are quite a different thing entirely. I.e., it's better for children to explore the world and find what they like on their own rather than being forced one way or the other. My point is that we shouldn't prevent them from being exposed to things based on moral grounds. Nor should we enforce them being exposed to certain things on moral grounds either.
Dom,
We should essentially let children figure it out for themselves as much as they can.
what's
That's how you raise a full-fledged human being.
James Johnson, I would have been surprised if you were. I was just saying, careful with the words others will take away from you.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you for incentivizing me to provide added context. But just to be clear, that's the clarification I was making was don't enforce them to consume certain things, but don't prevent them from consuming certain things either. Let them figure shit out for themselves as and when they can.
I think I'm kind of a prime example, actually.
Oh yeah, I'm an example of this too. All of my favorite things growing up were shit that I figured out for myself, or that circumstances sort of led me to organically.
Honestly, it's more the latter than the former. Granted, for me.
Yeah, but from what I've discovered, you didn't explore things very much when you were a kid.
Oh yeah, like, I was like full disclosure. I don't know if I've said this before, but I didn't start reading until like I was in second or third grade.
Uh-huh. I kind of cheated when I was a kid because I had all sorts of
No wait.
I had all sorts of physical issues reading, so I tricked people into reading to me when I was a kid.
No, first grade. Sorry, first grade.
Mm-hmm.
Until first grade, I mostly skipped reading. Kindergarten.
But as a prime example of this, and this, especially given the whole Roald Dahl thing, this popped into my head. One of my all-time favorite movies growing up was Matilda, and the way I discovered Matilda, the movie, was every summer. My stepdad's mother would rent out a campground, and my mom and my brothers would go off and do camping things, whereas I, being an introverted little shit, would always stay in the camper while they were outside doing camping things when we went up and visited them. And the two movies that they always brought with them were Space Jam and Matilda. So I watched Space Jam and Matilda probably a dozen times before I turned like 12. Just because all the years that we went up to visit my stepdad's mother during the summer, and I would sit in the camper and watch Space Jam and Matilda over and over and over. Which honestly are both two really good movies. Although I will admit that Space Jam has a lot of cheesiness to it, and Matilda is probably the better of the two. I still love both of those movies.
Ironically, what got me into reading was Goosebumps.
I became obsessed with those around middle school.
You forget where I'm younger, so
Yeah.
I also started reading.
I mean, to be fair, Goosebumps, most of them were already published before my time. So by the time I got to middle school, our reading teacher had a whole shelf full of Goosebumps, Nancy Drew, and Hardy Boys, and I binge read pretty much all of them, of all three.
Um,
Actually, I don't think I ever read Hardy Boys. I tell a lie. I read a bunch of Nancy Drew, and I read all the Goosebumps though.
I,
And several of my friends were like obsessed with Goosebumps. That's how we became friends.
um, I don't know if anyone. This is another. Well, I know R.L. Stine made like a couple different series. Like obviously Goosebumps was like kind of his big one. And then there was Mostly Ghostly, which I read a few of those. I never read the whole series, mind you.
I didn't realize I didn't realize Mostly Ghostly was based on a book. I only remember the Disney Channel adaptation.
I remember, I remember the movie too. It was actually a pretty good one. Uh, and I don't know if anyone's ever heard of this one. The Rotten House.
It doesn't sound familiar. I remember Goosebumps and I remember Haunting Hour. Haunting Hour was basically the edgier teenage version of Goosebumps.
Yeah, it's. I mean, look it up. It's very different comparatively to like his other works because well, I won't say it has like a through line, but it is continuous story.
Hmm.
Like it's a set of characters. It's not like an anthology or anything.
Okay, question. Which is your favorite Goosebumps?
Attack of the Mutants.
Hmm. I think mine might be
Or
Monster Blood, just because that was Monster Blood was the one that got me into it, and all the like sequels to Monster Blood.
okay, so it's either it's kind of tied. Attack of the Mutants or a Shock on Shocker Street. And I
Another one I really like is called Why I'm Afraid of Bees.
I think
Um,
I read that one.
hmm,
I don't think I ever read that one.
hmm.
But sorry, I think I've explained this before, like a long time ago. But the reason why those two movies, those two books that have been kind of a big influence, like my favorites, because they kind of influenced me on who I am now. Because
Mhm,
Attack of the Mutant was like very superhero comic books and stuff. That kind of got me into comic books and
hmm,
superhero stuff like that. Right? I mean, I was already into those things, but I think that kind of helped me push forward more.
hmm,
And a Shock on Shock Street was very much like, well, it was about like a horror movie franchise called Shock Street and stuff, and that got me
hmm,
into like movie stuff and like wanting to do that kind of stuff. Well,
hmm.
okay, no,
And
actually,
horror.
if nothing else, it at the very least, and like schlocky horror, not like whatever the fuck people are doing these days. That's
Hmm.
yeah, like
Another really good one I really love is Be Careful What You Wish For.
that sounds familiar. God,
Uh, Little girl befriends a gypsy, does her a favor. Gypsy then says she'll grant her three wishes, and shenanigans ensue
yeah.
from the wishes, as you can imagine.
Uh, how many boots to the head do I get for not knowing any of these?
Um, all of the boots to the head, like the world would be out of boots if I gave you as many boots to the head as you
Uh,
probably deserve.
Ironically,
For
one of
that.
my favorite episodes from the Goosebumps series, like the original '90s one, right,
Hmm.
was calling all creeps.
I remember that one. That one's good. Yeah.
It just had a weird, like it was so different because I remember it having such a different atmosphere. Like it wasn't even like kind of jokey or anything, really.
Yeah, calling all creeps is almost like it's almost on par with like a Twilight Zone type thing.
Yeah,
Um,
like
the
I've even
haunted mask, the haunted masks parts one and two are still probably in terms of the show the most awesome ones. Though I did like that. I think they got up to two Monster Blood iterations in the show. And I will say, I actually kind of favor the show's backstory for the Monster Blood over the book's backstory for it.
Um, yeah, like even calling like even how it looked, like the lighting and stuff, it was so different comparatively to like the other,
Yeah.
uh, uh,
I think we both grew up a lot on the show Goosebumps as much as we did the books.
yeah, it was yeah, it would rerun every October on the Cartoon Network when they did that.
Yep.
Uh,
Especially Haunted Mask.
yeah,
Um,
um, I remember.
though though I have to say, of the shows, I actually, even though I grew up with Goosebumps, I actually really like the Haunted Hour TV show better.
I did too because, well, to be fair, I think I appreciated the jump in quality, mind you. Granted,
Mhm.
I am pretty sure they were running on a kind of a shoestring budget, but at least it looked.
Yeah, they both were shoestring, but the Haunted Hour series had the benefit of coming out like a decade after the Goosebumps show did, so
There is one.
it just had modern production values.
Okay, and one last thing. Sorry, we went on a tangent there. Uh, we like one last like one of the episodes I remember the most clearly because I never really. I was pretty young when the Haunting Hour came out, and I never really got to see much of it, mind you,
Hmm.
just because busy with life. And I think it was also on a channel that we didn't have cable for at the time.
The Hub?
Yeah,
Yeah.
um, it was a clown episode where this kid,
Oh yeah, the clown.
and spoilers for anyone who wants to see this, I guess. I don't.
Clowns are actually a species
Yeah,
of like
it turns out
supernatural entity or alien. I can't remember what the backstory was.
I don't think they said it. To be fair, like I knew they were a species, but I don't think they ever said like if it was
Yeah,
significant.
long story short, clowns are a species
Yeah,
in this particular hypothetical, and
and
and this kid comes from a family of clowns and doesn't really understand why his family are so weird, and then when he hits puberty, he becomes a clown.
yeah. And it's funny because he's scared of clowns. Like he has what is it called? What's the phobia for clowns again?
I think it's clonophobia.
Uh, Probably. Um, yeah, he has that, and yeah, it's just like it's a. So the issue. So, okay,
One of the most interesting one of the most interesting spins on puberty ever, probably.
yeah, the weirdest thing that always kind of bugs me with like these kind of anthology series is more or less, and this just kind of goes with my own feelings of anthology series overall, is that when you have a couple episodes that are like that introduce like these really interesting concepts and you just want to see more of those.
And yeah, and they never by the very nature of an anthology, they rarely if ever revisit them. That's why I really liked whenever Goosebumps would do like a sequel episode or a two-part episode, because like you get to see the characters come back. Although on the topic of Haunting Hour, my favorite episode of Haunting Hour, probably surprising no one, is My Sister the Witch.
I kind of remember that one, yeah.
Because it actually isn't a terrible rendition of how a teenager becomes a magical practitioner. Like they play it fairly straight to the point that she uses a spell in that episode, the 9 knot binding spell, which I actually like. That was actually one of the first spells that I became familiar with as well. So like in the I remember the first time I watched the episode, I was sitting there listening to it, and I'm like, are they actually doing did they actually pull a real life spell in here? And then I had to physically run and go and look up one of the books that like one of the first books I got when I started studying magic, and I flipped through it and I found the page that had the spell on it, and I'm like, you son of a bitches, you actually pulled in a real spell here. Good for you.
Also, this is a weird one. And you remember the Nanaue episode?
Um, Not off the top of my head. The two episodes I remember most from Haunting Hour are My Sister the Witch and The Most Evil Sorcerer two-parter.
Um, well, I can't remember. I think the title was "A Shark in the Pool" or something, where this kid who is like working at this, uh, yeah, he's working at a pool, like community pool, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sees a shark. It turns out his family are descendants of Nanaue, the Hawaiian shark god, and
Mm-hmm.
when they go into water, they turn into sharks.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look that up now.
Yeah. Um.
I'm gonna have to binge watch a bunch of old Haunting Hour episodes and a bunch of old Goosebumps episodes.
Anyway,
To be fair, Goosebumps is free on Netflix right now, so I probably will go and rewatch a bunch of Goosebumps.
I don't have Netflix, so anyway,
Mhm.
we went on such a tangent, but it's about a group.
Childhood books and shows are awesome.
Yeah, I never finished the Aragon series.
Oh, the books. I had to do a double take because I was trying to remember if they ever did a show adaptation. I don't think they did.
I read the books. Like I read the first three books. I know a fourth one came out because when I went to Walmart one time, um, there was actually those door things they have. So like, and they put the ads on them.
Mm-hmm.
One of them had, and this was like a decade or so ago. One of them had the book, the fourth book, Berzinger, I believe it was called.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
The one with the golden dragon in it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Which I believe was actually like a word for a spell in the magical.
Yeah. It's the Elvish word for fire in Aragorn. Brizdiglu.
Yeah. I have never read that last book, and it somewhat pains me.
I actually also remember when that book came out because funny story. That was right around the time that I was first getting my baclofen pump put in for the first time. I was like 15. Um, and in order to basically make sure I was comfortable with the surgery and everything, my mom buttered me up and took me to Barnes and Noble because that was the easiest way to make me happy when I was a kid. Was take me to Barnes and Noble, and right near the stand that had all the Fourth Aragon books, which again is a series that I never actually read. But right near the stand of all the Aragon books, they had these little golden dragon plushies that that were supposed to advertise the fourth book coming out. And in addition to a bunch of other books that I got, because I believe that was when I got the Barnes and Noble edition of the Iliad and the Odyssey. That was when I got that. Um,
You were 15. Actually, no, I'm not even surprised. Why the fuck am I surprised?
I was reading Stephen Hawking's Universe in a Nutshell when I was 9. This shouldn't surprise you.
Maybe I'm surprised
Um,
that it took you until the age of 15 to read the Iliad and the Odyssey.
oh no, it wasn't the first time I had read the Odyssey. It was just the first time I had read the unedited version. I had a kids version when I was in like 6th grade of the Odyssey.
Anyway,
Yes, I am. As you so often say, I am that bitch. But that's neither here nor there. I got a bunch of books that day, but in addition to all the books that I got that day, I also got the little Golden Dragon plushie, which I'm pretty sure I still have somewhere.
so Katano Gaming says hello. Also asked,
Hello, Ahsoka.
also asked you, Don, are you interested in kaijus?
Um, in kaijus.
Yeah.
Yes, I have yet to own all of the Godzilla movies, but I'm going to fix that sooner or later.
Anyway, we really got to get back to this one.
Let's move on.
Uh,
We we started reminiscing about all the great stories and stuff of our childhoods, and it became a thing.
Actually, fun fact: I've never finished a book. I've never finished a book series. That actually sounds a lot more sad than I anticipated it to be.
No wonder it's taking you so long to read Dresden Files.
Okay, to be fair, every time I've gotten the book, I've gone to libraries. I haven't gone to a library in a while when I've gotten those books. So, like,
My
okay,
dude, I literally sent you a link a long time ago that was like all the audiobooks for them. So like
I think I still have it. I just busy. With my,
I will send it again just to make sure because you need to Dragon Turtle back me up on this. He needs to read Dresden Files. I got Dragon Turtle into Dresden Files as well, and I'm still mining some goodwill off of that I got
uh,
into Dresden Files.
Ahsoka Tano. Okay, got a manga you might like. Then it's a romance manga about a girl who can become a kaiju. Kaiju Girl Caramelize. It's written by a female author. It's also a fun read.
I've heard of that. I haven't. I really have no interest in. I really have no interest in watching it though. It doesn't sound like something I could enjoy.
A romance story.
Yeah, but it centers on a girl.
Fair enough.
I I read a lot of romance stories, but most, if not all, of the romance stories I read are gay romance stories. Which side note, speaking of kaiju, that reminds me of Fire Breather. God, that should have gotten its. Originally, they had pitched that as a pilot movie. I really wish it had gotten a show.
That is so weird. That was actually like a really good movie, and I remember it still.
Yeah, I still remember Fire Breather too. Also, also Duncan's kaiju form was attractive.
No comment. I got nothing. I have nothing to say to that.
I
Anyway,
think he was on one of my Smash or Pass lists. Why are you surprised?
yeah, it was a comic first. Granted, they really heavily changed it for the movie.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Uh, yeah, I got a comic with I did not know I got a comic with Invincible. Actually, that's interesting.
It crossed over. Damn.
Yeah. Anyway, oh yeah,
Now I kind of want to see Duncan and Mark fight because that'd be cool.
although if I remember correctly, again, I haven't read the comic series myself, but I've looked it up. Apparently, Duncan's father in the comic was the king of dragons, not the king of kaiju.
I mean that makes slightly more sense, but in any case, like that still makes him basically for all intents and purposes, a demigod.
Yeah, because dragons are minus the depictions that basically depict them as beasts.
Yeah, I mean, dragons have always been basically the fundamental spirits of the earth in most mythologies. So they are basically the next best thing to gods.
Right. All right. Anyway, we really.
And I would pause to make a Dresden Files reference here, but you haven't read it yet, so get on it.
You do realize, like, okay, it's the same thing you told me when I keep recommending Arcane to you. Of like,
Mhm.
the more you recommend it to me, the more I think about putting it off. Not out of spite, I think it's just like that whole thing of like bandwagonness.
Uh, dude, you've missed the Dresden Files bandwagon by several years here. It's not they're on book 16 actually they're on book 18 now because Jim is still writing 12 months. But yeah, they're 18 books into the series, dude. You're not joining a bandwagon by catching up.
Yeah, it's Fire Breather was one about the guy who was half kaiju, giant troll.
Yeah, the basically kaiju demigod.
It was a 3D animated movie. Yeah, it's supposed to have a comic, but like I said, the comic's very different comparatively. You can look it up. I don't know where you could get it or not. I have very limited knowledge on it. I looked that up like years ago.
It's an image book.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Dragon Turtle on this. In a sane world, the book series that defined our generation would have been Dresden Files.
I think the thing is like, it's the thing of like when people hype something up to me, and I'm worried if nothing else about that whole thing of like it's not as good as you guys have made out to be, or I won't think it's as good.
The most I will say is that it takes a few books to warm up.
Okay.
But like that's the most I will say is books 1 to 3. Even Jim Butcher has kind of acknowledged that they're a 3-part pilot, basically. But by the end of book 4, you will probably be hooked. You will probably also want to smack me because book 4 is the book that introduces Mab, and you'll probably read it and go, he read this and thought he wanted to bind himself to this entity. What the actual fuck?
I had a brief even before. I had a brief understanding. I'm good. So Tom, been pretty good. Dude, one thing I just have a general rule of myself that I don't fuck with the supernatural, and you're actively doing that.
Again, 16 years of being a magic practitioner. It sort of surprised it. In most circumstances, surprises me it's taken me this long to bind myself to something. Although, to be fair, for like the first 5 years or so of my practice, I didn't involve myself with any spirits of any kind. Because I was kind of a narcissistic little shit, and I essentially operated on the assumption of if I couldn't do it on my own, I didn't want to do it at all. So I avoided dealing with spirits at all. But then a couple years down the line, realized how stupid and short-sighted that was, and how much of what I liked about magic was involved with spirits. So, and the rest is history. But that's not it. That's neither here nor there. I am surprised. I am looking forward to what's going to happen when you get to book 4 of Dresden Files, and you finish reading it and you go, wait, he read this and thought that signing up with Mab was a good idea.
Dude, I've always thought that about you ever since you told me you've been in.
I know, but trust me, reading Summer Night is going to give you more context for that.
Anyway, like God, focus.
On point. Yeah, back on point.
It's about giving the new generation different expectations and metrics of respect. Whether that succeeds or not is an entirely different matter. You can peruse a fairly comprehensive list of changes to dull and decipher yourself. Of course, this isn't the first time we've come across similar issues. Disney Plus has included disclaimers on certain older films that the portrayals of race are outmoded. HBO Max attracted plenty of raised eyebrows with Gone with the Wind when Gone with the Wind was removed from its library before later returning with a new introductory video about the film's context. Not to mention the removal of certain episodes of various series.
Yeah, again, fuck your censorship. It is wrong, no matter why you do it.
Netflix has also been accused of censorship over edits made to some films, including ones as apparently innocuous as Back to the Future Part 2, though this particular edit was subsequently reverted and may not have been changed. may not have been a change made by Netflix. Hold on.
I was about to say because they edited Back to the Future too, but they still made freaking cuties for fuck's sake. What the hell?
Wait, there was something. There was something I remember people getting upset about with like I don't know if anyone knows about this anime, but Tiger and Bunny. It's like a superhero anime that came out in like the early 2010s, or well, late 2000s, early 2010s. Where like these superheroes that work for like corporations, like get sponsorships and stuff. I'm not doing justice in its description, but the creators of the show actually got like actual legit sponsors, like actual companies to allow them to put their logos on the characters. And when Netflix got the rights to premiere that show and even produce like not produce but air the newer seasons that were coming out lately or like last year, they removed those. I'm just pointing that out as like kind of a fact that one, it was kind of necessary for the show itself to have those. So,
sorry, I got distracted by the stuff that Ahsoka is saying. Ahsoka, I will say for my part, I find humans boring, so ghosts don't interest me very much. Not when there are so many other kinds of spirits to interact with. I don't like my general sort of quippy approach is I don't find humans particularly interesting when they're alive. Why would I find them any more interesting when they've shuffed off their meat suit? But yeah, I much rather deal with non-human spirits than ghosts, because to me ghosts are boring in the same way human beings are boring for the most part.
Moving on, or did you have anything to say to like any of the stuff that was?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay. And we all know video games are anything but free of the censor's will, with games from Manhunt to Wolfenstein and Fallout 3 being changed or banned in various countries. I don't have anything to say that, so.
Well, I mean, sure, hypothetically, but what I mean is that I don't particularly find former physical entities to be that engaging when there are spirits that have always been spirits that that one can interact with, like angels, like demons, like fae, like jinn, gods, etc. I find humans and animal spirits boring when there are so many non-human or rather non-mundane entities to work with. Anyway, moving forward.
Biggest difference between censorship in film and games and these developments in the literary world is that it's not just removal or editing, it's often rewriting. The question is whether that can truly be justified. It really can't, ever.
Yeah, no, the answer is no, and the question was stupid to begin with because everyone knows the answer is no.
What the fuck? Okay, the case for keeping stories up to date. Roland Barthes, I think. I don't know. The death of the author was a paradigm-shifting essay that positioned the reader as the locus of meaning in any text. However, anyone with even a passing academic interest in stories can understand the value of placing them within their context. Stories exist throughout the author's experience. Therefore, they are laden with particular biases. In the original text, the Oompa Loompas in Charlie and Chocolate Factory were African pygmies, simply comical slaves in service of Willy Wonka's industry.
I mean, no, they were Mesoamerican very clearly because they were obsessed with cacao beans. So, like, you're close, but I'm gonna have to be pedantic here and point out the difference between African pygmies and Mesoamerican pygmies because they were very clearly they were very clearly supposed to be in the same vein as the Mayans, Aztec, and Olmec because they were obsessed with the cacao bean, which is something that was rather unique to the Mesoamerican countries.
Central, I don't talk to no fucking spirit or nothing, man. I don't fuck with the supernatural, man. Like, no.
He's afraid of being the first one to die because ethnic.
No, not even that, man. It's just like you can invite some bad juju on you if you fuck up something.
I mean, there are also ways to counter it, but never mind.
Do you really think I'm that smart to do something like that?
No, but once again, and to remind you for the umpteenth time, you do know someone on speed dial who can do that sort of thing.
I just no, man. I don't fuck with the supernatural, man. I don't fuck with it at all.
I know you're afraid of being the first one to die in a horror movie.
I'm just afraid of dying in period. Because okay, one thing, you get killed by some supernatural, more than likely that thing is going to claim your soul, and you're going to be stuck with that thing for eternity. Right? Am I wrong?
I mean, in most cases, you're wrong, but it's not impossible.
Also, the fact that I don't want to be killed by something supernatural, man. That just seems fucking terrifying.
I I I mean, to quote Jafar from the third Aladdin, or no, the second Aladdin movie, uh, the things you really have to worry about are the things you can live through.
I'm just
Dying isn't so bad. There are a lot of things that things can do to you that you unfortunately can live through.
I don't go to haunted houses. I don't mess around in cemeteries. I don't summon Bloody Mary. I don't call for Candyman. I don't do none of that shit, man. Okay? That is, as my uncle and I have quoted, WPS. White people shit. Okay? I don't fuck with the supernatural.
Again, your fear of basically being the ethnic character who dies in a horror movie is kind of adorable, especially because you would survive long enough to call me at least. You'd be the dude who goes, I know somebody who could help us here, and then I show up to be the like exposition dumping expert character
Oh,
in
hell
the
no.
second act.
I'm getting the fuck out of there. Nah, man. Hey, y'all can die by yourselves. I'm fucking out of here. Nah, man. I don't.
Oh, brainstormer.
I'm sorry. I just don't fuck with it. I don't fuck with it, man. It just nah, 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 nah. No.
Oh, brainstormer.
Um, anyway, just nah, man. I don't. Nope.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dragon Turtle. Normally when I watch supernatural horror, all I can think is there were 507 different ways out of this, and you guys were too stupid to avail yourself of any of them. Like, like the thing I hate most about supernatural horror movies, right, is that almost always the like magical MacGuffin that starts everything off is labeled with a do not touch or do not read thing. Like the Necronomicon is sitting on the table with a do not read label on it, or the like Dybbuk box is sitting in the corner with a do not open label on it. And these motherfuckers will nevertheless find a way to justify in their own heads opening it or reading it or whatever. And I'm
I
like,
point this out. How many? I just want to point out how often is it super rich, college bred white people in those scenarios?
I mean, you're not wrong, but race has very little, if anything, to do with it.
I'm
Um,
saying, don't. I'm just saying. saying. White people shit, man. White people.
I oh, brainstormer, you're adorable. But that's neither here nor there. Yeah, but my biggest problem is in order for horror movie plots to work, you literally have to have the characters be the single most stupid motherfuckers on the planet. Also, it's worth noting that because this happened in literally every horror movie ever made that has a supernatural element, pretty much, um, I'm always left with the assumption of even if you didn't know anything about the actual supernatural people in this horror movie, are are, are you seriously telling me you've never seen any other like any horror movies in your like do horror movies not exist in horror movie universes? Is has always been my question because it's like even motherfuckers who have seen horror movies know enough not to when you see the ominous grimoire sitting on the table where they do not read thing on it, most people who've seen horror movies would be smart enough to go, even if I don't think this exists, I'm gonna behave so that I don't get eviscerated on the off chance that I'm wrong.
Don, let's be honest. There's still going to be that one dumbass motherfucker who's going to do it as a joke.
The professional skeptic who will flout the rules just because you guys are being stupid. This couldn't possibly exist. Reads incantation. Oh no, I'm being eviscerated by zombies. Who could have ever seen this one coming? And it's that's why one of my favorite scenes in any horror movie ever or any like supernatural horror movie ever is in the Johnny Depp Sleepy Hollow, where after the first time Ichabod sees the Horseman, he's having like a nervous breakdown, and he's trying to explain to Bortus Van Tassel, played by Michael Gambon, um, that everything was true and that the Horseman actually exists and yada yada yada. And Bortus just goes, "Yes, we know. We told you. Everyone told you. We've been telling you all along." And I'm like, finally, someone says the thing everyone is thinking. Like, yes, yes, we know. You were told. You were warned. What the hell?
Anyway, yeah, we are getting so fucking off topic.
Moving forward.
Right. That characterization became problematic in its time, and Dahl revised the influence us to become more outwardly fantastical beings. Given that Dahl himself proved willing to change the portrayal to reflect shifting social norms, then changing the influence again from men to people in the name of inclusivity seems in keeping with his sentiments, and if not one change is justified, are not others also?
Uh, None of the changes are justified, my dude. None. Yet. No point. Moving on.
Right. Clearly, that's the opinion of Dahl's Living Family, which commissioned the new editions in 2020 before selling the Roald Dahl uh, story company to Netflix in 2021. Ian Fleming's estate has provided similar commentary on the changes to James Bond works. These changes then are not driven as a response to baying mobs of woke commentators calling for censorship, but for the still living people who knew these departed writers best. I what?
I still don't care. I don't care if Roald Dahl's widow says it's okay to edit shit. Don't do it. I I don't even care if the author themselves, if they're still alive, says it's okay to do it. They're wrong because they're not the same person who channeled the original story to begin with. Like this is something I wish I could beat into the head of Neil Gaiman. Just because you're the author, that does not give you the right to change shit. Frankly, if you're gonna change anything, you should change the ending because the ending is the most inorganic part of the Sandman. That's neither here nor there. That's a completely different story. But point being, the author does not have the leeway to change shit arbitrarily, especially not if it's based on moral grounds.
Moving on.
Hmm. sorry, I'm still reading through Ahsoka's uh, stuff about ghosts. Like I say, Ahsoka, I don't really care about the dead. The dead don't interest me. There are so many not there are so many like um non former physical entities, non material entities to work with that are far more interesting and more powerful and a lot more interesting to engage with than things that used to be alive. Like I just don't care about things that used to be alive. Things that used to be alive are boring. Humans and animals are basic. Is all I'm saying. In very much the basic sense. Which, to be fair, I feel the same way about Saints. Like Saints also kind of bore me. Um, on the auspices that Saints are basically just souped up ghosts. And again, I find ghosts boring.
Okay. Beyond that, reprints and new editions often make amendments and footnotes or forewords. In fact, the Roald Dahl Story Company noted this in defense of the changes, writing in a statement when publishing new print runs of books written years ago. It's not unusual to review the language used alongside updating other details, including a book's cover and page layout. Our guiding principle throughout has been to maintain the storylines, characters, and the irreverent and sharp-edged spirit of the original text. Does it make any difference? Does it make any difference if those edits are sanctioned by the estate rather than the original author? Isn't it just a slightly different form of editing?
Um, it doesn't make any difference, and yes, it is. It is just a slightly more different version of editing, and the editing isn't just. And again, I would go so far as to say that even the author themselves doesn't have leeway to edit. The most, again, the most I will say is if you want to make a sequel that changes shit or retcon shit, that is permissible because that is an additional expression. That is an addition. That is a separate thing. It doesn't change the thing that previously existed. It only adds to your oeuvre or your bibliography or whatever. Like that's justifiable. That's why, as much as I think the Sandman sequels that Neil Gaiman made are shit, and I ignore them, they don't change the original text. But the Sandman Netflix adaptation, for example, the fact that he gave his blessing for that, his assent to that, is a travesty, and it makes me want to beat him over the head with a rake.
Mm-hmm. Mega?
Moving on.
Why a rake?
Because I've been watching Simpsons reruns recently, and I was thinking of Sideshow Bob.
For the record, I don't know why my mind also was thinking you literally grab like the creepypasta monster, the rake, and just start being him, using him as like a club, and being Neil Gaiman over the head with that.
I mean that's an option too. Although frankly, if I was gonna send anything after him, I would send a Baku, just for thematic appropriateness. Uh, Japanese Japanese dream eater spirits.
Okay. Uh, the final major consideration in the readership. A discerning reader will be able to parse the language used and acknowledge that attributes reflect the beliefs of the times in which these classic texts were written. However, with James Bond, we're talking about spy thrillers, quintessential spy thrillers to be sure, but still books with an entertainment first intentionality. With Roald Dahl, R.L. Stein, and Dr. Seuss, we're talking about children. Consideration of the property of certain words, phrases is unlikely to be front of the mind when people are reading these books, regardless of whether that's children or themselves or parents to children. If small changes can mitigate the risk of social harm, then is it not justifiable to make those changes?
No, no, it isn't. This is just yet another version of "Won't somebody please think of the children?" And frankly, the children don't want to be thought of in that way in any circumstance where they've been asked. And there's a there is there are several very good reasons why we all collectively decided to mock the phrase "think of the children." And you think you can get around it by reframing why you're saying "think of the children" this time. And frankly, I don't care why you're screaming "think of the won't somebody please think of the children." It's still puritanical, moralistic, and fuddy-duddy, and you should be ashamed of yourself for thinking it. Children like edgy shit. Also, I'm gonna be this level of pedantic here and say that some of the charm of these books come from the particular phrasings used. Um, even if it's somewhat risque phrasing, and the nature of the sentence or the nature of the paragraph or the nature of the story is not the same without those very particular phrasings. And very often when children's books use risque words, they use them somewhat ironically to essentially take the piss out of them. And if you change the word, you remove that context. You remove the ability to laugh at the allegedly serious topic of certain words. And also, there are some authors whose entire style is contained within their phraseology. And if you change the phrasing, you lose what made that author charming or engaging to begin with.
Okay, moving on.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. I do think after we're done with this, we're gonna have to skip the last topic,
Mm-hmm.
just for time's sake.
Mm-hmm.
The case that literature is under assault. Paradoxically, fuck.
Paradoxically.
Thank you. That final point is often used to argue that changes shouldn't be made, simply removing harmful content so that it's not seen doesn't improve the situation according to proponents. Erasure is antithetical to social justice because it removes opportunities to discuss and debate the merit or lack thereof of outdated opinions. Rather,
You're presupposing that social justice is a good thing, and I disagree. Morality shouldn't be in the public sphere at all. It should be done privately and individualistically. Morality does not have a place in the public sphere. Only ethics has a place in the public sphere, and ethics and morality aren't the same fucking thing.
but, Cronon says you can barely hear.
Yeah, your mic is quiet today. I don't know why.
Actually, it might be because I'm not close enough. So, am I coming through louder now, or?
Oh, a little bit, yeah.
Huh.
I don't know. I don't know if that's better for Corona. Like I had to turn your volume up earlier because it was too quiet.
Well, that's weird. I haven't changed anything. I think I was just sitting back too far. So, okay, let me get closer then.
Never mind. Ahsoka said that it was just Chrono. Although, like I say, it happened to me earlier, but then again, I also turned up my volume. So
Okay. Uh, okay. Where was I? Or did you have anything else?
no, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Rather, the presence of problematic ideas is important because it invites readers and/or parents to interrogate those ideas within the modern context. How can we truly,
Or maybe they just don't give a fuck. Your morality isn't the center of the goddamn universe.
Dalton? So I do want to finish.
Hmm.
How can we truly understand the modern debates around racism and sexism, for example, without understanding historical realities of slavery, discrimination, and ostracism? Literature offers an easy path for anyone to engage with these concepts and should
Stop,
continue to do so.
stop presupposing that those things are important or even a thing anymore. They're not. Your your you and your ilk's obsession with rehashing these same topics over and over and over again, as though women never moved on from the 1890s, black people never moved on from the 1950s, and gay people never moved on from the 80s. It's just stupid. Like the 90s and early 2000s happened. Please stop ignoring that they existed.
Uh, moving on.
Yep, moving on.
Okay. Likewise, the question of uh, authorial intent is a double-edged sword. Dahl, Fleming, and other writers may well have been willing to update their books to reflect the times, but that can't be viewed as blanket approval. In some cases, replacement of a single word can irrep-
Irreparably.
yeah, yeah, alter the meaning of a sentence, and that can reverberate through a much larger piece of writing.
Yes, I that is one of the reasons why this is a terrible, terrible idea. Don't like the specific phrasing of how things are written is very much sort of like a spell in that you can't just mix and match other words that have similar meanings. It very much is very it's very specifically calculated or very specifically precise to evoke what it evokes already. You can't just mix and match. And even if you could just mix and match, you're often not qualified to do so because that would require you having a greater understanding of the material than the person who wrote it and or knowing what they might have swapped it for, which you don't, especially if the person in question is already dead.
I Okay, this is weirding me out because I haven't touched anything for my mic or anything.
Yeah, I don't. I think now Chrono is just referring to in general you happen to be more soft spoken than me, which is true to a degree. Anyway, moving forward.
Okay, it's weird. All right, I mean, I'm just a soft-spoken guy overall, so
Hmm. I mean, he did literally suggest that I co-host because he assumed that I would be able to do more talking than he could. So,
uh,
and the rest is history, as they say.
as helpful as others may be, there's no guarantee they won't make a grievous error of judgment. Do the benefits of reducing harm outweigh the dangers of changing the meaning of the original work?
No, especially when you consider that the harm you are presupposing does not exist or is not meaningful. I.e., your ideological presupposition that harm is even occurring could also be wrong. It's never forget the fuck off because it's not even a thing option. You idiots. Moving on though.
Right. Okay. Perhaps the most enduring and persuasive argument, however, is one that harkens back to George Orwell's 1984. Where might this lead in a post-truth world where national leaders can be made to say anything through deepfakes and collective gaslighting is a political tool? We should be wary of accepting this kind of blatant censorship and rewriting. As the adage goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Though your personal politics may agree with the appeal of minimize social harm, that may not be true of the next revision. Furthermore, the erasure of history enables anything to be overwritten, convinces that Eurasia has always been at war with Oceania. Warnings of a slippery slope may seem overblown, but what if they're not?
Yes, that person is sane, although, once again, I'm going to point this out. Just because you think harm might be occurring does not mean you are correct in that assumption. Your notions of harm may themselves be an ideological presupposition that you need to learn to look beyond. People might not be in pain even though you think they should be. Anyway, moving forward.
Right. Okay. Reflections. So far, I've offered questions instead of statements with the aim of keeping the narrative objective. Uh, you can use that to decide your own opinion. However, if you indulge me for just a little longer, I'd like to offer a short personal reflection. It seems as if the arguments for and against this show a tendency to fiddle with text, be they film or literature, can be loosely grouped under opposing ideologies. Support for alteration views these texts as entertainment because they serve primarily to amuse. They should be inoffensive. Opposition makes a more academic approach. It views them as art and artifacts, so we should not remove the elements that make them challenging. Of course, it's not that simple. There's a whole range of sociological, cultural, and ethical considerations as well, but I want to keep this brief. When I first
And you overlooked the most important thing, which is the question of whether harm is even occurring to begin with. And I'm going to keep harping on this because it is the most egregious oversight on your part. Even when you're attempting to be objective, you fail because there is nothing objective about your notions of harm in this case. Moving on.
yeah. When I first heard the dilemma around Dr. Seuss, I thought, who cares? It seemed like much ado about nothing. In retrospect, it looks a lot more like the testing of the waters. This latest wave of edits is most significant because one, it affects more books, and two, it's more intrusive. Those differences make for an abrupt shift in context. R.L. Stein's claimed that he was not made aware of changes to Goosebumps makes that clear. Wow.
So yeah, they changed shit without telling him. So fuck off. Anyway, moving on.
Stein is unlikely to burn bridges to condemn Scholastic, but his claim nevertheless emphasizes the possibility of publisher overzealousness. Uh, we've seen escalation of art censorship before, such as the covering and later desecration of nude statues in the Vatican City. However, for all that, I'm hopeful that we live in a more enlightened age, or at least one where the profit motive doesn't support systematic censorship of what might be deemed problematic content from Toni Morrison or Joseph Conrad?
It's not the profit motive you need to worry about, my dear. It's the moralistic authoritarian motive, i.e., the we're doing this for the greater good. We know what's better for you than you do, etc., etc. And the assumption that some kind of censorship is a good thing. We just have to figure out how, which I fundamentally disagree with the premise on its face. I don't think it's a matter of scale. I don't think it's a matter of severity. I think it is a principled matter of being wrong to begin with, i.e., don't do it no matter how minor it seems. Moving on, though.
Okay, yeah, one little bit left, I think. So, after all, it's only by grappling with the past that we can learn from it. To that end, words matter. It matters that we can view outdated stereotypes so we may better. Oh
Bless you.
God, it feels like someone punched me in the throat.
Ah,
Give me a second.
yep.
Okay, I am good. Okay, let me start over. After all, it's only by grappling with the past that we can learn from it. To that end, words matter. It matters that we can view outdated stereotypes so we may better understand why they're outdated. If there is any solution, it's one that demands a breaking of the status quo. Instead of
Stop presupposing the harm is there to begin with. Stop presupposing that those stereotypes are outdated or that they are harmful or that they do need to be challenged or updated. They don't. It's very possible that those stereotypes exist in those books specifically to mock them to begin with. And even if not, who the fuck cares? Most stereotypes are rooted in some kind of truth. That's why they're called stereotypes. It's a term that we got from the early parts of printing. Stereotype is a type, i.e., a typeface, that is supposed to be applied to a large swath of text, or kind of text. That's what stereotype means. It's taking something that applies to one and applying it to all. And just because something might not apply to all circumstances in a given case doesn't mean there is no truth to the stereotype. And ignoring any significant truth to a given stereotype is also wrong. Also, many people in many different categories like their stereotypes and fully embrace their stereotypes. Like, have you ever met an Irishman who has a problem with the stereotype that Irishmen drink? Because I have not. In all my days and all my avenues, I've never met an Irishman that is anything but proud that Irishmen are presupposed to drink, or an Asian person who likes who likes being associated with martial arts and being good at math, and so on and so forth.
Now we got maybe a sentence or so left.
Yeah.
Instead of continuing to celebrate works that include sexist or racist subtext, we need to elevate and champion the books, the movies, the music, games that reflect the present and point the way to a better, more equitable future. We can't do that with big leagues. Okay?
Stop presupposing that sexism and racism are things, please. Moving on.
That was it. Thank you, Baron Turtle. Weather's been weird around here. Like it gets super cold, but it can also be kind of earlier today. It was in near the 60s for a good couple hours. Well, But yeah, just to kind of end on something a little more positive, sort of like bittersweet, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I recently saw this movie Monday, last Monday. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Shazam! Fury of the Gods. For the record, this is not an official poster. This is a fan poster. A link to the actual, like, to the person who made it in the description down below. So there's just official posters. I don't think we're that. That's all. But anyway, yeah. So I saw it Monday, and I've had time to like think about it and stuff. So just kind of give it a structure here for the review. Obviously, we're going to kind of give our general thoughts first, and then we'll kind of start going into the spoilers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you want to start? Mm.
You can go first.
Okay. Well, one, I really enjoyed it. It was really just kind of a breath of fresh air over like uh, uh, a lot of the stuff that's come out recently in terms of DC stuff. Um, and I even refer. I guess I am somewhat referring to the James Gunn stuff like Suicide Squad and Peacemaker.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing against those things; they're good, mind you. But
Mm-hmm.
they had that kind of more edgy wit and stuff to it. This was just general like fun, camp, wholesomeness to me.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's from my own personal perspective on this. Um, and yeah, like when I sit and I retract my previous statements that I had said like in the last time we reviewed the trailer for the movie. Like I was worried it might have lost its heart or would lose a bit of its heart. Um, I was completely wrong in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Although I will say, I didn't get as emotional as I did with the first Shazam. Like no like verge of tears or anything, but it
Mm-hmm.
it still like it made me feel happy watching it. It was like it was just a lot of fun, a lot of good. It's good.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, okay, you turn.
Okay. Um. Yeah, I really liked the first Shazam, and I felt like the second one was an improvement.
Mm,
Um, because it did what a sequel is supposed to do. It took everything that worked in the first one and scaled it up. And in this case, that means doubling down on the magic and the mythology, which is always going to be a good sell for me.
mm,
Also, Helen Mirren is always a win, and Lucy Liu is also always a win.
all right. Um, is that it? Or, like general thoughts you get on those?
No, I'm good. I'm getting tired, so it's hard to.
Okay. So kind of moving on to the spoilers. Well, I do want to point out this movie. Like, I won't lie, there were moments I genuinely wanted to laugh out loud, but because I was in a theater, obviously I had to be quiet because there were like other people in there
Hmm.
with us. But it
Hmm.
it was genuinely fun. Like honestly, I don't laugh a lot when I watch movies or have like legit. Um, yeah, I don't. I'm very stoic when I watch movies a lot of times. So I say that's very indicative of how good it was written and done. Obviously, like that I was able to like produce, um, able to make me laugh.
Hmm.
I guess there is somewhat of a gripe I do have, and spoilers by the way.
Hmm.
Nothing compared to Dalton's gripe, but I kind of wish we got more of the kids themselves.
Yeah, they spend the majority of the movie in their champion forms.
Yeah, so, but I mean, the adult actors didn't do bad. I'm just like, you know,
To be fair, I didn't miss the kids, but then again, I also didn't really resonate with the personal aspects of the first movie, so I was kind of glad to see it diminished a little bit.
I'm giving you a glare right now, you jackass.
Yes, yes, I know, but we all know that characters aren't really my thing usually. That's brainstormer stick. So
Um, and like the antagonists, like I would say they were quite better antagonists compared to Savannah of the first movie, even though like Savannah wasn't a bad antagonist.
and I'm looking if there's ever a third if there's ever a third iteration of this, I'm looking forward to see what he and Mr. Mind will come up with.
Right?
But
I would love to see a monster society of evil.
that too. Obviously, it would be nice if we got Black Adam versus Shazam, but because Dwayne Johnson is a egotistical prick, we are probably never going to get that.
Um,
And of course, doubly, especially because of the James Gunning of the DC universe,
right,
we're
well,
probably not even going to get continuations of this.
yeah, which does suck. So you want to move on to like any gripes you've had?
Yeah, the one gripe I had was actually it was a positive thing that got turned into a negative thing by circumstances. Because at the end, again, spoilers, um, Shazam and his family get recruited by the Justice Society of America. And in theory, I should be jumping for joy over this. But there are two small problems with this. One, the aforementioned James Gunning happened, and so nothing to do with Black Adam or the Justice Society is canon anymore. And two, even if it was still all canon, Dr. Fate is dead, so I'm a lot less excited than I would be. And and yes, I'm aware they could pass the helm along and we could get another Dr. Fate. But the simple fact of the matter is the possession retcon is stupid and it makes Naboo equally stupid. And more to the point, Kent Nelson is the best and most competent version of Dr. Fate. So doing Dr. Fate without him, especially so early after just introducing the character cinematically in Black Adam, pisses me off.
Right.
He was genuinely really freaking amazing in Black Adam, and the fact they had to play musical chairs with the helm pisses me off.
Um, so I guess some. I'm not. Yeah, no, that is it's fucked and stupid and just
Like what bothers me is you knew when this movie was coming out, and if you know that nothing in the previous iteration of DC is going to be canon anymore, just cut the scene. Just remove it from the post credits and it's fine. But you left it in even knowing that it's irrelevant now, which means you're teasing me with something that I in theory should love but now can't because you nerfed the universe.
um. Again, it's just like it's a fun adventure. I do want to say like the visual effects were kind of better in this one. Obviously, I think just because when they got the budget increase and
Yeah, it went from being 80 million to 120 million or something like that. So unfortunately, that's also going to come back to bite them in the ass because this movie is currently bombing horribly. Sad.
that's no, it really does suck. Honestly, ironically, I saw videos starting to pop up of reviews. I didn't check those out because one, I didn't want to be spoiled, and honestly, I've stopped putting any trust in in critics' opinions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I do want to point out like a couple of jokes that just stuck out to me that were just funny as all hell.
Mm.
The running gag of Billy being having a crush on Wonder Woman.
I mean, I don't blame him.
No, I don't either. I mean, obviously, like she's kind of one of my go-to. Like, if I were to have a fictional like relationship with a character,
If Brainstormer had superpowers, he would totally be doing exactly what Billy is doing.
I would not be as awkward as him. Let's be completely honest.
I mean, no. But then again, nobody goes in intending to be awkward, so who knows?
Give me some credit. I am somewhat smooth. All right, I say so. Yeah, I'm getting like some salt there, but no, it's funny. Like I won't lie, when they did the first joke of like the dream sequence, I was a bit cringing, but not like the kind of bad cringing. It's like just the cringing of like this clearly is the joke.
Yeah, that's exactly what a child would be thinking right now,
Yeah,
especially a kid who's almost 18.
yeah. So um, and it's a quick and you miss it joke, but the foster father. Um, it sucks that they never. I don't remember them ever really saying their name. Like I remember the mom's name, which is Rosa,
Hmm.
but he he. It's like at the end, like the end of the gag of when Billy starts trying to flirt with Wonder Woman. And he asks, like the dad asks his wife, "Should we be concerned that our sons are into older women?"
I mean, to be fair, of course, based on how long she's actually been alive, Wonder Woman is the older woman compared to literally everyone.
That's fair.
And age is very sort of irrelevant here when you consider that Diana is eternally young and Billy is currently in an adult body, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. But that's just me.
um, you know what? He said he was near 18, so I'm not going to argue with you on that entirely. Just given the logistics, it's weird
I
overall.
I I mean, when you talk about Shazam, I mean we have both, all the physiological attributes they're given and also the wisdom of Solomon. So I wouldn't say there's any consent issues here.
Anyway,
And Lord knows nobody is going to blame him for consenting to freaking Wonder Woman, frankly.
anyway, yeah, and I do also want to point out everyone gave it their all in terms of the acting. By the way,
Hmm.
like I'm not even just talking big names. I'm talking like the kid actors too and stuff.
Hmm.
It's
And
just
I did like that they confirmed that Petro is gay, which is gonna make my life easier in a bit here.
I'm not gonna ask. Um, I was waiting to bring that up, so thanks for bringing that up for me. I love the way that they kind of did it. It's just like it's kind of how like family is supposed to do, like supposed to work.
Yeah,
Um,
we know it's not a big deal. Moving on.
yeah. Although I will say it, what I mean in the beginning of the movie, they kind of set it up, mind you, but uh, I kind of do wish there was a little more like subtle building to it, mind you, because I will admit it somewhat does come out of left field.
Hmm.
Like it's just like it's.
I mean, it was in the comics too, so no one should be
I'm not.
particularly
I'm not
surprised.
right. I'm not like. I'm just saying like I kind of like from a writing perspective. I wish there was a little more hinting beforehand. Obviously,
It was basically just an also rand of, oh, and by the way, while we're here, this is also a thing.
Right. For the record, I didn't really get that at first. I'll be fully honest until like he literally said it. Because again, I'm sure this is, I've said this so many times on this podcast, but I I'm a dense motherfucker. I never know something is going on until it's like legitimately just said to me.
Brainstormer is slow on the uptake.
I really am. That's how I've never really gotten a girlfriend because I never can guess whether or not a girl is flirting with me or not. I think actually plenty of girls have flirted with me now that I'm thinking about it. Actually, I just never.
Which of course makes me have to go.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just never. That actually is my issue. I will admit that I'm not. But yeah, I again unless like it's the same thing with like social justice thing. If someone doesn't point it out to me, I don't see it. Really, then
Mm.
I'm trying to look for it.
Brainstormer is so pure that it actually negatively impacts his love life.
Shut the fuck up.
Never.
Um. Also, the music too. Like it again. A lot of things were just done a lot better in the sequel comparative to the first movie. Like
Which is what a good sequel does. It
yeah,
takes
yeah.
everything that worked in the first movie and does it a bit a bit bigger and a bit better.
Also, it got kind of like it. Like I mean, the first movie had dark moments. I'm not going to deny that, but
It continues here. It's
yeah,
very much in the 80s movie style of we are going to mess up some kids with this movie.
yeah. Like the first scene, and again, spoilers. People get petrified, turn to stone, and
Yeah.
like one of them gets like the daughters of Atlas, uh, the Lucy Liu's character. Can't remember her. Calliope, right? It's Calliope.
Calypso.
Oh, I thought that was Helen Mirren's character.
No, that's Hespera.
Oh, okay, my bad. She shatters the dude, like this guy who got turned to stone.
Yep, he's dead.
Like, what the?
Yep, dead.
Also, the set designs too. Like, again, everything was just like very comic booky, but also like it felt tangible as well. Like they were legit sets,
Hmm.
which I mean, given I don't want to compare it to Marvel. Obviously, I think it's stupid, but Marvel has done this thing where they mostly are using CGI sets, and like I am sure everyone here can notice that it does feel a little weightless and empty, right?
What one of the villains of Shazam 2 Dragon Turtle turns someone to stone and then shatters them.
Yeah, we were talking about Shazam: Fury of the Gods. I recommend watching it. It's a fun, good movie.
Yep. And it's a shame that we're never gonna get a third one.
Like, yeah, you're good, man. I get distracted IRL all the time during this thing. So,
Hmm.
but oh, and God, I noticed this. One of my favorite Easter eggs that they did was well, I don't know if anyone knows this, but I can't remember if it was the 70s or the 60s, but there was a Captain Marvel movie that was made, like originally, right?
Hmm.
And there was a guy, uh, like in the Fury of the Gods movie, who was wearing like the classic, like I'm talking like classic Billy Batson outfit from the comics,
Hmm.
and he says, "Thanks, Captain Marvel," to Billy in the movie, and that is the original actor who played the first live action version of Captain Marvel, I believe,
Hmm.
which
I
was
didn't I didn't notice that actually.
I watch a lot of videos. I'm not going, so
Hmm.
it's like one of those random tidbits I
Hmm.
that I know of. But yeah, that was like just a little fun fact there. Yeah, it's just a really good movie. And again, it does suck that we're not going to get a third one. And I would propose something fun that we do briefly before we cut off, but it would somewhat disappoint us, I'm sure.
Hmm.
Is that we brainstorm like live here, Shazam 3.
Well, obviously, the villains have to be Mr. Mind and the Villain Society of Evil.
Now, Monster Society of Evil, because they're monster villains. Because a lot of Billy's villains, like early villains, were effectively monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But yeah, honestly, especially given the Justice League Easter egg or Justice Society Easter egg rather at the end, I would love to see I would love to see particularly Atom Smasher and Hawkman back. I would especially timeline, so we're not getting that unless unless they're smart enough to either um imply that Hector is a thing, i.e. Carter's son becoming the next Doctor Fate, or his wife Enza, although I don't think that quite counts this time because canonically, according to Black Adam, um, Kent was 120 years old, so presumably his Enza is dead, which
uh,
is a shame. But that's I would love to see Enza be the second one to take up the helm like she was in the comics. I would also love to see Hector. But probably in this hypothetical, Doctor Fate would have to still be dead, so no point in speculating there. But I at least would like to see Hawkman and Atom Smasher back. I don't really Cyclone didn't really leave any impression on me.
it's kind of a shame, to be fair.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's a fun movie. It's kind of, I don't know. I'm probably gonna get a weird side eye from you, Dalton. It was honestly, this is kind of what I would want a Power Rangers movie to be.
Yeah, I mean that's not obviously could you imagine Helen Mirren playing Rita Repulsa? Now,
Oh,
now that you put that idea in my head, I want it. God damn it.
huh. That would be a very interesting take. That really would.
Who would you want the Green Ranger to be though? Who would you cast as Tommy?
I'll be fully honest. I think in this scenario, you'd have to like get unknowns.
I mean, yeah, but I'm trying to think in terms of honestly, depending on when this happened, the kid who plays number 5 in Umbrella Academy would be a good Tommy.
Fuck, I know his name. Like he's been actually suggested to be Damian Wayne a few times.
He should like I don't like I'm not the biggest fan of the idea of doing Damien first in the new James Gunn DC universe, but if they got number 5 to play Damian Wayne, I would be happy enough to at least give it a chance.
Aiden was it Aiden Gallagher?
I think.
Let me look that up just because like it's gonna bug me
Yeah.
to find out.
But regardless, number 5 is awesome. Honestly, he could also play Wiccan in the MCU, but I think they've already casted somebody as Wiccan, so that ship has unfortunately sailed.
You know what's the funny thing? I remember seeing someone like honestly like actors from Cobra Kai could also do like Power Rangers.
Yeah, that wouldn't be stupid.
No, really one.
Who would you cast as Goldar?
Oh, actually, no. I did do this on. I did do a casting. Before. Yeah, Aiden Gallagher was number 5. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What I had someone. Well, it'd have to be someone like preferably it would be someone that could act not like in motion capture, but like a mixture of CGI and a practical suit.
Mm.
Because that is always my go-to. Like get a mixture of practical and CGI, just so like
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you have some tangible for people to see, but also like you can enhance it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but well, I think my go-to is always like Kevin. Like, I don't know how to say his last name, but he's a writer and a director. I and he's also he is an actor. Like he's a very big, imposing actor, and he's got like a really deep voice.
Mm.
He's done works like um, well, he's been in the Lycan. He's been in the Underworld series. So
Mm.
I know, but like again, he's a really big kind of imposing. Like if this was like mid 2000s or like early 2000s or hell even in the 90s, I would have gone Michael Clark Duncan.
I would have gone Ron Perlman, but that's just me.
Maybe Clancy Brown because I think he can do that more over the top nature than Ron Perlman can.
I don't know. I think Ron Perlman could do over the top.
Mm, even when he was Hellboy, he had that more grounded. Well, again, that is the character. I'm not gonna deny it.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's HB.
Yeah, or Red. I don't know. I mean, Clancy Brown, he's always done a lot of voice work, but he again, the guy's played Mr. Crab and Savage Press, so uh,
Basically, having him play Goldar like he plays Savage would be interesting.
yeah. Uh, uh, okay, here's a big question because this would effectively be like a Thanos kind of character, Thanos level in terms of
Mm-hmm.
new comparison.
Lord Zed.
Yeah,
This is a good question.
because honestly, how I would do Lord Zed in terms of movie style, very little camp.
Yeah, I'd play him more like he was when he was originally introduced before Rita's love potion.
Nice. I mean, you could get the original voice actor and maybe have him like kind of what they tried to do with the Bayformers. I realize it's a terrible comparison, but like they got the
Mm-hmm.
original voice actors and they were able to play like a very like more darker version of those characters.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but if we had to like just pick a new one overall,
Yeah, I don't know.
that's very that's difficult because like you need someone that has like just in like full body costume just has a presence overall.
Yeah, yeah. And again, you need someone who's physically intimidating to play him.
Also, like again, a voice too, like that, like kind of growly, almost. Like
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I say almost inhuman voice as well.
I mean, obviously they could pitch shift it a little bit here and there.
But like, okay, that's gonna be a weird one. If nothing else, voice wise, maybe uh, Benedict Cumberbatch.
Essentially doing his smog voice.
Little darker and deeper, sure.
Hmm. I I hate. Honestly, I'd have Benedict Cumberbatch do Finster instead.
Mm. Actually, well, okay. Question for you guys, like in here. in the comments. Look, yeah, the chat. Who would you cast as Lord Zed? Because this is bugging me because I want to figure something out before we go.
Honestly, we'd probably be better off just playing it safe and doing Josh Brolin.
It's too easy though, and I don't like doing easy.
I mean, sure, but some things are easy because they make sense, and this is one of those. Also, I just want to point this out. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Collateral Beauty, but in that movie, Helen Mirren plays Death. So if we had Helen Mirren playing Rita and we had Josh Brolin playing Zed, we could essentially have Thanos finally get his romance arc with Death. I realize I'm probably the only person in the world who would care about such a reference, but still.
No, I understand. Fuck's sake. Anyone I'm thinking of is kind of younger than Helen Mirren, age-wise. So, because we still want to do that whole love thing. Granted, I would have done like an evil version of.
I wouldn't have. Honestly, I wouldn't do the love arc. I'd play Zed more like he was when he was originally introduced.
Well, no, I mean, if we wanted to, I would honestly not do the love potion thing, obviously, because it's stupid and contrived. But
honestly, I don't know why they weren't just married to begin with, because Rita was called the Empress of Evil anyway. So how isn't she married to him anyway? But that's just me.
Again, and this is just my go-to for any type of like relationship for villains, which is evil, Morticia, and Gomez Adams.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, saying evil doesn't really like change anything. To be fair,
yeah, because I mean they're already, but that's neither here nor there.
But this is gonna keep me up all night. I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, I do think it is time for us to call it because it's like 20 minutes till 12. So, and you still haven't eaten anything, so
I have not, and I'm getting tired.
Yeah.
So,
so with that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, avidazai, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
I'm hungry, so fuck off.